Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and tonight we are going to take a look at the 5 finalists for the Minnesota Vikings general manager position. We made it to the finalist level or whatever. When they will name a GM, not quite sure because we've got Memorial Day coming up and I don't know exactly the timing, but the Wilfs will be flying folks in, and in some cases not having them travel very far to do the in-person interviews before they decide to make a decision on who will be the next GM of the Minnesota Vikings. So we're going to run down the list, talk about where is the edge. That's been the thing I've kept going back to for the candidates, for the ideas. Where is the advantage to hiring each one of these final 5? So we're going to go through them, and then questions, comments, thoughts, feelings on anything. If you have one of these candidates that you like as your best idea, but really there's one question to be asked. So let's get into it. And that question is, after seeing the way that Rob Brzezinski managed the offseason, would you like him to be the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings? Because in this list reported by Jonathan Jones of CBS, includes the Vikings interim general manager Rob Brzezinski, and the other 4 are Broncos assistant general manager Reed Burckhardt, Bills assistant general manager Terrence Gray, Rams AGM John McKay, and Seahawks AGM Nolan Teasley. So let's go one-on-one, but that's where I'd love you guys to start in the comments section is, do you have a different favorite? I know it's really hard to look at general manager candidates and be like, I like that guy. It's not like you can really watch the film. It's not really like you can break down the data. And I don't pretend to know a lot about what these people would do if they became the GM, but we can pick apart certain elements of their backgrounds and of what their franchises have done and what they might be bringing over to Minnesota. So let's begin with the key here. Now that it is out there from Jonathan Jones that Rob Brzezinski is a finalist for the general manager position, from my seat, I would say that the answer is yes. For would you support Rob Brzezinski carrying over as the general manager? And the main reason for me is that he was able to do something I think is very, very difficult in an interim general manager position, which is to put on the restrictor plates, put on the guardrails, and not let things get out of control and maintain a vision for both the now and the later for the Minnesota Vikings franchise, because they went into this offseason with a ton of uncertainty. It wasn't just, oh, okay, well, you've got to, dust over here and you got to tidy over there. It was like, no, there could be a lot to happen here. You have to make a decision at the quarterback position, which kind of fell into their lap a little bit with Kyler Murray. I don't know if you give the interim GM the credit for that as much as maybe the head coach getting Kyler Murray here, but they sign him to the $1.3 million deal. That's a great start overall for the franchise, but you went in with uncertainty there. And then with the free agency, the Vikings have been really, really leaning heavily on free agency for quite some time now. You go back to 2023 when they cleared out a lot of the roster, and the last 2 off seasons have been spend. And a lot of those moves have worked out. I mean, Van Ginkel, Grenard, Cashman, Isaiah Rodgers, I would say overall, Aaron Jones worked out pretty well. Even making the trade for Jordan Mason, like they did a good job at building through free agency. But then in 2025, we really saw the limitations of leaning on free agency and making that almost exclusively where you were getting a lot of your talent. So Brzezinski did not do that. Instead, he let a lot of free agency just roll on by, which was a pretty big surprise to me and probably you. And, we did like a 3-hour live stream on James Pierre. So, I mean, I certainly thought that the Vikings were going to be much bigger players in free agency. And it was a little hard to see the vision. I remember seeing people on Twitter and so forth saying, well, is Rob asleep at the wheel? Did somebody lock him in a closet? And, stuff like that during the first couple days of free agency. But then you ultimately saw it come together, which was keeping the players that they had by redoing some contracts, letting go a couple guys that were vastly overpaid and did not perform at the level that they expected, and then waiting it out. And when Rob said at the owners' meetings that they were keeping their powder dry and they were, hey, we're not going to play until September, so we've got plenty of time to improve the roster, not jumping at this free agent, jumping at that free agent, getting into bidding wars, and instead waiting to see who falls through the cracks. And now we look around, there's still free agents that after June 1st, the Vikings could sign and make their roster better, but they end up with Juwan Jennings, which if they had done that on the first day of free agency, we would have said, wow, that's a really impressive job by Rob Brzezinski. And then I think people will feel very differently about the draft. For me, I think that when you're in an interim type of situation and your background is much more on the salary cap side of things, that leaning heavily on the coaching staff to go through your draft and finding best fits for those guys and getting immediate buy-in from the scouting staff and the college side and then the coaches and bringing it together and making it work for the draft. All of that, I think, checks a lot of boxes and is a way you can do it. I wouldn't always advise just doing exactly what the coaches say, but when you combine those things and you get buy-in from the coaches on those players, I think there's a much better chance that they'll stick with them, which has been a bit of an issue for the draft picks in the recent past, which is that it felt like with a lot of the young players that they brought in, if they weren't great right away, it was like you're out the door. And in this case, where the coaches are very invested, they're going to put in the effort. And also we can see clear paths for pretty much each player in the draft. You can look at any player, just pick one out of a hat and say, well, this is where he's going to go if it works out, if they feel like he can get on the field, whether that's the first round pick or even the 6th round pick, Damon Claiborne, we can all see where that might go. So overall, I think that strategy was effective for this draft, even if, hey, I might have picked that guy or you might have picked that guy, but that's not really the way to evaluate how a general manager did in the wake of a draft, because we don't know who's going to be right and wrong, but doing it in a way that the coaches bought into, I think was important for Rob Brzezinski. So when we talk about where is the edge, where is the advantage, I would say it's in two places. You have a head coach and a defensive coordinator who are good at their jobs, and a defensive coordinator who is downright amazing when it comes to player evaluation, right? And development, maybe we're still asking that question in some spots, but in terms of identifying talent, identifying fit, well, you could go through the roster since 2023. Brian Flores has done a fantastic job there. And with Kevin O'Connell, I think that he knows what he wants for his offense as well. So the edge would be that you are going out and finding the best possible fits and bringing everyone together to do that in the draft. And the other part is that when you have someone who has managed the salary cap for this long and who understands assets and the spreadsheet element that is the NFL. I mean, that's the reality, right? The NFL is a spreadsheet in a lot of ways. It's how much cap space do you have? How much draft capital do you have? And that is your money. That's the economics of the NFL. And I think that Rob is at the top of the game when it comes to understanding that and managed it very well throughout this year, including the trade for Jonathan Grenard. I was talking to somebody the other day about that, and just like they felt like the Vikings got good return when you consider that Philadelphia immediately gave him $50 million, guaranteed. That would probably not have been a good investment for the Vikings. But in years past, under late stage Rick and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, they are absolutely no chance that they are trading him away for the future and for flexibility right now in free agency once they get past June 1st and the Jonathan Allen money hits and so forth. So I think Rob overall did a great job of proving himself, in part by not trying too hard to prove himself. And that shows his experience, his respect around the league. There's a lot of things that I think you can say in favor of Rob Brzezinski to be at the top of the Minnesota Vikings organization. And he certainly knows the Wilfs, and he certainly knows inside and out how every single element of the Vikings building operates. So all those things, the experience, the performance that we saw, the relationship with the coaching staff that he's built over the years, and the connection with the Wilfs that, even if there is we're going to have equal power and so forth, I think, the Wilfs buy into him is all in. So I like that idea of having someone who has final say that the ownership backs and believes in and trusts at the very top. So that's the case for Rob Brzezinski. But if you disagree, let me know in the comments if you like that idea. I still will continue to bang the drum for Rob as president and the next guy underneath him. But, I don't know if there's any indication that that's going to happen from any of the reporting that is out there. So let's go through the other candidates. Reed Burckhardt, the assistant general manager for the Denver Broncos, a former Minnesota Vikings scout who has worked his way up and been somebody, it's funny because you hear about he's a scouting genius or he's a wonderkind or something. And I wouldn't put it that way. And that those always send up red flags, right? If that's the case. But Reed was a former football player. He is one of us from Minnesota, and he did it, I would say, the right way. Which is you come into the league at the bottom and you learn and you work your way up and you impress people. And it was Spielman era where he was there working through building a contender year after year in Minnesota with Spielman, but then goes to the Denver Broncos. And I know it's a group effort. You can't blame one person or praise one person for what happened here or there. But when you look at the Vikings defenses, he was here and then he goes to Denver, they rebuild their defense to be absolutely nasty by the time they get Bo Nix. He has been with competent franchises. George Payton is highly respected in the NFL. He's done a phenomenal job working with a very strong coach in Sean Payton. And there was a strong coach here in Mike Zimmer when Reed Burckhardt was a Minnesota Viking. The downside to that is that there's not a lot of experience there as an AGM. He was just named an assistant GM last year, so he has not had the same amount of experience as someone like Rob Brzezinski or some of the other candidates. That would be on the downside. Familiarity with the Wilfs, familiarity with how the Vikings organization operates, and having been up close for a team that built themselves to be a serious behemoth in Denver through a lot of really good player evaluation, player decisions, that great defense that they have, the really good offensive line that they've built. They did hit on their quarterback. How good he's going to be long-term, I don't know, but Bo Nix is pretty darn good right now in order to get the Broncos to where they were. So Reed Burckhardt is somebody who has taken the next step. And when he was here, I remember his name coming up a lot as somebody that people had a sense for someday could get to this point. And in the final five, pretty good. But, there is a bit of a trend here with our next candidate, which is Terrence Gray, who is the Buffalo Bills assistant general manager. And that trend is that he also worked for the Vikings. And this has become clear now that all of these guys, except for one, have connections to either Kevin O'Connell or the Minnesota Vikings organization. And I think that tells you, and this is not something I've been told, but you could sort of common sense it, that they want someone who understands how the wheels turn inside of TCO Performance Center, how the communication works with the Wilfs, what the demands are from the ownership level to the general manager level, and how that is supposed to work, and sort of what it means to be, and I know this might sound a little corny, but like what it means to be a Viking, right? Like they want someone who gets it. And these guys, these last two candidates, Reed Burckhardt and Terrence Gray, would fully understand that. Terrence Gray left the Vikings for Buffalo in 2017. So he was a big part of the 2012, and you have Harrison Smith, and then 13, and you get Xavier Rhodes, and then seen that kind of build. And going to Buffalo, you could easily say, and you'd be well within your rights to say, well, don't they just have Josh Allen? But I think that would be a little unfair to Brandon Beane. And I've kind of made fun of Brandon Beane a couple of times about the whole wide receiver thing, because it was friends of mine that he, went after on their radio show about, not drafting this guy or drafting that guy. And he had this big crazy rant and stuff. But when you look at the defensive side of the Buffalo Bills, what they've done through even Josh Allen's contract, it's been impressive. They have overall drafted pretty well, and they filled a lot of spots on that side of the ball when things got tighter and things got more challenging, despite, the price tag for Josh Allen. So that might be something that he has to do here with Kyler Murray, depending on the price tag, depending on the performance. It's a little bit down the road, but you have to consider that this is someone who has come from a world where they were dealing with constraints and had to build a lot through the NFL draft. And so Terrence Gray, that's his universe. And if you're looking for, hey, we want someone who really is going to put all their focus into the draft, both Reed and Terrence would be two guys in that category. Now, the next one is another inexperienced in comparison guy. So Terrence Gray is someone who's more experienced. I mean, he's been around for quite a long time. He cut his teeth in the early 2000s with the Kansas City Chiefs. So you're talking about more of someone who has seen multiple different organizations, worked his way through multiple different organizations, had a lot of success along the way when he was in NFL front offices. And that's a little bit different from some of the other candidates, including our next one, which is John McKay, who is the assistant GM for the Los Angeles Rams. I think he's in his second year as the AGM, which again is not all that much, working under Les Snead, but this would be a familiarity with Kevin O'Connell because McKay was there with the Rams and they both get it. And another, I can't avoid some of the cliche stuff here, but like the Rams way, the Patriots ruined that for everyone, didn't they? With how corny that was. But the Rams have a way of doing things that has been very successful, and it starts with their head coach, but their general manager has managed really brilliantly both a build and then an all-in type of scenario. But then I think a lot of us, including myself, thought, well, that team is in big trouble after they win the Super Bowl. It's just all going to collapse. And for a year it did. But then after that, right back up because they were able to be very good in the player evaluation and very good in the free agent decisions. And of course, the coaching and schematics has been excellent with the Rams. But when I think of the Rams, I think of sort of the modern type of franchise, like that they are at the front of the line with just about anything, whether it's, hey, they're going to ying when somebody else yangs or whatever type of phrase you want to use there. They're going to have the most tech. They're going to have, whatever they can do in their front office to have the most possible information to work with. And even though John McKay is not as experienced, it feels like an attitude that needs to come to the Vikings because there may need to be a little bit of refreshing, even if you don't come in and just start firing people like crazy and get rid of everybody and bring in the whole new front office. Even if you don't do that, there's a lot of folks that have been in their positions for quite some time. And Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was supposed to be the person who kind of did this, brought a fresh face to it, but it didn't seem to fully have the backing of the coaches, which if there's a connection there with McKay and O'Connell, I think that would help a lot. And it didn't seem like it was really executed what they had tried to do in terms of trying to modernize the franchise. It felt like Rick Spielman was running it the whole time. And our last candidate, so they would be going, the edge there is that you bring all the stuff from the Rams. And the downside is that there's not a lot of experience there. And our last guy, a little bit in the middle in terms of experience, began in 2013 as a scouting intern and has worked his way up and up and up the ladder in Seattle and has worked under one of the premier GMs in the NFL and somebody who accomplished something that just doesn't happen much in the National Football League, which is winning a Super Bowl with two very different teams. In fact, completely different teams. That was John Schneider of the Seahawks. Built the Legion of Boom, built the team that just won with Sam Darnold. You do not see that. And in both instances, built over a number of years through the draft, through smart free agent decisions, through a big trade or two. Leonard Williams is the big one. And through a bold move to move on from Geno Smith and to bring in Sam Darnold to work with his coaching staff, which was probably a better fit. So training under John Schneider for this time, I think Nolan Teasley probably really, really well understands the art of building a complete team And this is something that I thought about quite a bit, and I wrote about yesterday at purpleinsider.football, which is that the NFC is an arms race. And I'll get to your comments and questions in just a minute. But, the NFC has really, really become an arms race. I went through this last night, and I believe out of the 16 quarterbacks in the NFC last year, 11 of them at some point had been a top 10 quarterback by PFF in the last 3 years. So what is that? 80% or 75% of almost 75%. Math people would be better. 75 would be 12. So almost 75% of the NFC has had a quarterback that ranked in the top 10 by PFF in the last 3 years. So what you're going up against is a lot of competent quarterback play. And it's up to you as a franchise to build everything else. And I know that requires Kyler Murray to be good. It would require or JJ McCarthy to click or you to hit on a draft pick or whatever. But when most of the NFC has imperfect but also very good quarterbacks, it's going to come down to who builds the best roster and then who hits at the right time. Like Seattle had everybody stay healthy. The matchups they had in the playoffs were ideal. They got home field advantage in part because of a ridiculous 2-point conversion that no one continued to play. And one guy walks over and picks up the football. And then all of a sudden you end up in the Super Bowl because of it. So things have to go right. But the teams that have thrived have not had Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Joe Montana. It's been Jalen Hurts. It's been Jimmy Garoppolo. It's been Brock Purdy. It's been Sam Darnold. Now, all of those quarterbacks are very good, but none of them are all-time greats. Like, I don't know that Jalen Hurts is going to go into the Hall of Fame. Like, it seems like kind of a stretch to suggest that at this point. Or Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold. Like, none of those guys are, wow, that's Mahomes. That's Josh Allen. That's Lamar Jackson. But what did they do when they won or reached the Super Bowl was you could go through the entire roster and say, this is where their superstars drive their success. This is where their depth has been really good. And you can point to good evaluation, quality decision-making, and of course, fit with their coaches along the way. So Nolan Teasley, I think, stands out because of that on this list of potential general managers. So there is the rundown of the Vikings finalists. I don't know when they will be naming a general manager, but you've got a Memorial Day weekend, maybe a couple of days to fly them in, couple of days to deliberate in the front office, and then make a decision. Who do you want as the Minnesota Vikings GM? So that is my question for you folks today, which is, do you have a preference here? And I know you're working with not a lot of information, just backgrounds, but which one of those teams and their approaches, right? The Broncos, Bills, Rams, Seahawks, would you prefer to bring to Minnesota? So let's get into your thoughts here on who will be the next general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. So let's start with Ryan says Rob has to be the favorite if he's in the final 5 candidates. Well, I tend to agree that what it tells us is the Wilfs were absolutely impressed with Rob Brzezinski and the way that he managed his way through a situation that was not necessarily easy. I mean, I don't think he was prepared for it. Now, not with his background, I just mean for it to happen, because it seemed like it took a lot of people in the Vikings front office by surprise, the timing. And there were people around the league that were totally shocked by the timing. So Rob Brzezinski's going along his business and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's down at the Senior Bowl. And then all of a sudden, Rob, you're the general manager. Now you have to work out an entire plan, an entire offseason, figure it out on the fly with your coaching staff, get buy-in from the front office on the way that you're managing your way through the NFL draft and free agency, and was able to say, and I don't know what those conversations went like, but no, like we're not going to spend on this. We're not going to restructure that type of contract. And I have to imagine that the Jonathan Grenard decision was very, very difficult. And there was probably a lot of tough conversations there, because if you're a coaching staff, if you're Brian Flores, I mean, that's been one of your main guys, but it's not a good economics decision to keep him, so they decide to move on. So, I mean, I think it was an impressive job overall. I see that Rach disagrees strongly. Continue to steadfastly oppose Rob getting the job. Not just regular oppose, but the steadfast kind, which is why I feel confident he'll get it. Yeah, I'm not sure that I can understand your perspective fully on that, because if Rob Brzezinski was with another team and had the background that he has, working for a top-notch franchise and a franchise that had won a lot, maybe not a Super Bowl, but won a lot and was really good at managing its cap and was really good at asset management, which he was over this summer, I think you'd be saying, yeah, I mean, that's the type of general manager that we're looking for. So I'm a little surprised that you're saying that you're completely and steadfastly against somebody who I think it's very hard to argue. And you can, continue to jump in the comments and tell me exactly why. But I think it's hard to argue that they had a bad offseason. I mean, I guess for my purposes, it would have been really fun if they signed like 8 free agents and restructured every contract. But did that work the last time? See, what I thought was he might just end up doing all the stuff that we would have expected Rick to do, because he worked with Rick forever. But I don't think he handled it like that. I think he handled it like a guy who knows that he can keep working here if he wants to. Not like a guy who was trying to panic, win the most for 2026, show the Wilfs that he could make all the right moves and make crazy trades and crazy moves in the draft. Instead, it was handled like pulling out your hybrid and staying on the fairway, which is, I think, the right way to manage this offseason, even if it wasn't as exciting. And then to wait until the end of free agency, till you don't have to give up those comp picks, and then sign a good wide receiver. And they could still get a Kyle Van Noy, a Leonard Floyd. I saw Van Noy talking about how he's got teams that have contacted him and so forth, that there's still good players out there to fill out the depth of your team. And so he left the door open for doing that by creating a lot of cap space. So I could see where you would say, now, I think that if the best argument against Rob Brzezinski would be a Nolan Teasley or a John McKay, or even Reed Burckhardt, who was here but has been in Denver, they are bringing the philosophies of teams that have built really, really good rosters elsewhere. And you could make the case that what the Vikings franchise need is a refresh and new ideas. It doesn't need sort of the same old way of going about it. I do think that Rob's way was different because it wasn't panicky and it was kind of more methodical, and it was tilted toward cap space in the future, draft capital in the future, which I think is good. I think is good, and I think it's different. I actually thought Kwesi was going to do that, and he never did. But you could be saying, look, Seattle not only just won the Super Bowl, we're not just plucking from the Super Bowl team because that's what you do. They built a franchise that could sustain its success like it's been good year after year. They never have to tank. They did get a top draft pick who was pretty darn good from I think that came from the Russell Wilson trade. And they did have a reset year where they got another top 10 draft pick, but they're not a team that tanks or goes to the bottom. But they've been very good at drafting, very good at evaluation, very good at making the right free agent moves or trades at the right time. And how have they done it? Like bringing in the ideas from another team. I think that's your best argument for not going with Rob, is that this franchise doesn't feel like it's ever at the front of the race. It always feels like they're at the 8th or 9th spot in the race. Like, yeah, like you're a really good franchise. You have been for a long time. You've always won, you've always competed, but have you ever been the horse that's running up at the front where everyone is saying, man, the Vikings are just 2 steps ahead of everybody? I mean, that's been Philly. I saw my friend Ben Standig, who covers Washington. He does a poll every year where he asks a bunch of agents a bunch of questions. And one of the questions was, who's the best GM in the NFL? And one of the answers from the anonymous agents was, any other answer than Howie Roseman is unserious. Okay, that I totally agree with that, or, Les Snead belongs up there. But when are you up there? Like when are you at the very front of the race? So I think that would be maybe the question I would ask if I was going in a different direction. Chris says Nolan Teasley would be my choice, and really the evaluation skill of that front office. And if you listen to John Schneider talk, what he has been saying since they won the Super Bowl is that it's a complete effort for an entire front office staff, and it's not just him calling the shots. And I think that being under that kind of leader is a really, really positive thing for Nolan Teasley, because I don't think you can do this much better than Schneider. Now, he had some years where they did not draft well. He had some years where they gave away draft capital and where they did try to squeeze out everything from Russell Wilson, but made very shrewd moves in moving on from Wilson at the right time and moving on from Geno Smith at the right time. He's been willing to do that when even legendary players want to hang on for a little bit longer. But the main thing is the draft. They have not had a ton of super high picks. The two guys that they got were really good, Devin Witherspoon and Charles Cross. So those guys have worked out, and those were top 10 draft picks. But they've had a lot of success with a lot of other picks. Nicky Minwore, what a home run pick. Gray Zabel, what a home run pick. Their evaluation skills have been really great. And I think that's where the Vikings need to win the race for NFL roster building, NFC roster building, is in the draft. Because when you look at free agency, here's the reality of free agency these days. The salary cap has gone up so much that if you want to keep a player, you can. You can just do it. You can just figure it out. There are so many tools. It is very, very rare that we hear a team say, we're sorry, fans, we just couldn't afford him. Like, there's so much money, and the Wills have never been short on that. There's so much money out there. There's so much money that the owners have. They're making it hand over fist. They have cash over cap all the time because they are willing to spend if they want to. And what does that mean? That 90% of the time, the free agents that are hitting the market are doing it for a reason, because their previous team decided they weren't worth what they were asking for, which means you're immediately jumping into a pool where you have to be very careful, because there's landmines everywhere in free agency. There's way too expensive players. And I'm not saying that, the cap doesn't impact, any decisions. Of course it does. But if you really want to keep someone, that's my point. And if they're in free agency, there is a decent chance that their team just said, I don't know. Just not, there's injuries sometimes maybe that you don't even know about, or there's ineffectiveness, or there's fit in the locker room, or whatever it might be. So sometimes, price does end up playing a role, and salary cap does, but most of the time, that's why going and trying to build a team through free agency is very, very hard to do. Same with through trades. If you make a trade for a player that you absolutely need to be incredible, this would be like Dexter Lawrence. So the Bengals make the trade for Dexter Lawrence. It's the 10th overall pick, but it's a ton of money as well. And if he gets hurt or he doesn't get back to his old shape, where are you left? You gave up a great asset, a top 10 draft pick for him. I still like that trade for Cincinnati overall, but the point is it's very risky to play in the trade market. So Nolan Teasley, I think, would understand as well as anyone that you build through the draft and then you add on. I think there's a lot of reasons why that didn't happen under Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. They sort of got ahead of themselves a little bit in terms of their success. They didn't fully expect to be as good as they were in 2024, and then felt like they needed to solve every problem from the NFC wildcard round beatdown from the Rams, all in free agency. And they needed to keep every player who was involved in their success. But also, they gave away so much draft capital to move up to get Dallas Turner, to trade for this player, that player in the middle of the season. And at the end of the day, you're looking around and going, well, there's not a lot of young players here, and they need to get to that point. And they've gotten younger already. I mean, you look at the roster. I know Harrison Smith not being here is a big part of that, but already you look at the roster and go, okay, there's more youth here than there was just even going into last year. Hunter says, personally good with Rob. I think he has the ability to take a long-term approach. My biggest concerns would be player evaluation and ability to recognize short-term window. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because if you're Rob and you're the general manager, we do need to remember that general manager is manager, right? You manage all these types of people. So if you are working I used to work at a grocery store. I mean, if you manage the whole store, you have individual managers for different areas. You have your bakery manager, you have your dairy manager, things like that, right? And so you may not know everything there is to know about baking a cream puff, but you're going to make decisions based on your communication with those managers. So that's where, if you're Rob Brzezinski, you're going to make decisions based on your communication with the director of college scouting, with the head coach, with the defensive coordinator, and then at the end of the day, come to a conclusion. But you're not going to be like Rick Spielman. You're not going to go on the road, or you're not going to sit in your office for, 10 hours straight staring at your tape or whatever. Like, you're going to be communicating with people and making decisions based on the information that they are sharing with you. So it's a little bit different from, and all GMs should really be doing this, but I think there are some GMs who are like, I'm the best scout in the building because I'm the GM. So there's pluses and minuses to that type of approach. But just because he doesn't have a background in player evaluation doesn't mean they won't be good at it. It depends on how much he's willing to lean on the other voices. And I think we do know that having Brian Flores is an advantage there for the Vikings. Taslios, if Rob isn't getting a president title, he's going to be the GM. I could see that. I could definitely see that. I could also see, them talking to Rob and landing on a president title and saying, all right, well, if you're going to be president, who would you like underneath you? And, somebody like Terrence Gray or Reed Burckhardt, two guys that are really well thought of, would probably have the advantage there, where it's, hey, we're keeping it in the house. And that's where I could see, if you're someone like, Rach, who was against this, saying like, do we want him to keep it in the house? Like, the house hasn't succeeded that much. But I also think that the house hasn't succeeded because of some erroneous ways of thinking. Number one, mismanagement with the draft capital and the salary cap space at times. And also, a lot of this comes down to, and I had a really good conversation with Andrew Kramer a couple of weeks ago, and I asked Kramer, do you like the idea of Rob Brzezinski as your GM? And he said that he does. And I said, well, yeah, but what about 3 playoff wins since this and that and the other thing? And, do you need someone to come in and sort of guns a-blazing, shake it up, new sheriff in town, we're doing things different? And, what Kramer said was, I think sometimes we miss forest through the trees. Like, well, if they find a quarterback, then whoever the GM is going to look really good. But you have to build around that quarterback. And I think that Rob can. That would be, I think, your argument of, well, the Vikings haven't got there. But on the other side of it, the way that Rob managed this offseason set them up to be able to deal with the quarterback situation a lot better. And Rach says, what is their vision? It isn't particularly clear to me. Well, I think that the vision is not clear to anyone right now since they don't have a GM, but you can see where there has to be a refresh. There has to be a shift to getting younger. Well, of course, you are not talking about a team that is going to go all the way to the bottom or could even do it with the talent that they have. They couldn't just say, even if they went into this offseason and said, every person we can, we're going to release, they'd still probably be like a 7-win type of football team. And you really wouldn't want to do that with the quality of coaches that you have and just say, sorry, guys, we're going all the way to the bottom. But, Brian Flores is going to make it work. That 2023 defense wasn't very good talent-wise, and they still found a way, to win 7 games. And they, had Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins and so forth playing half the season. You're probably not able to go all the way to the bottom. But I think what you can see is that there is a quarterback situation that is going to resolve itself. Either Kyler Murray is good enough or he isn't to be the quarterback of the future, and either his price tag is manageable or it isn't, right? So you could look at it that way, that Kyler is either going to work out or not, and then you have decision trees off of that. So if Kyler works out, then you probably are trying to short-term it a little bit more because he is going to be 28, 29, 30. So maybe patch it together, through free agency a little bit more while still trying to build through the draft on a 2 or 3 year window with Kyler, right? If you are forced to draft a quarterback, then you're probably trying to reset a lot of your roster at that point. You're probably not keeping around certain players and moving on from certain players. So I would guess that you can't really formulate a true vision unless you know what's going to happen at quarterback, but you need to have different plans for each one. So if you're Reed Burckhardt or if you're Rob Brzezinski or whoever, and you're walking into your meeting with your binder with the Wilfs to present your plan, it has to be if this then. It can't just be, well, this is my plan for building a roster. It's got to be, well, if Kyler Murray is our quarterback going forward, then here's how we manage it. If we're drafting a quarterback, here's what I see in the next draft class. If it's JJ McCarthy, here's what I see from our salary cap situation. So it's a little more complicated than if you were walking into Baltimore or something and saying, well, everything's about Lamar. Cooper, what would you say favorite thing is about the written and audio video content is? I don't know if I have a favorite thing, Cooper. I appreciate you watching. It's probably this, what we're doing right now. I think it's all of it. Having the conversations, always changing every single day, trying to figure out what the right answers are. Probably every bit of that. So it's like my daily kind of strategy, if you will, is to get up and start writing and then do the show, research for the show, get ready, and then finish the article and send it out. So, I think interacting with you guys, though, is probably the best part. My favorite thing every week, Friday mailbag. My favorite thing here is the fan chat. So, yeah, I'd say that's the best part. Elite Acid says, I say get Gray for the GM and make Rob over him. Right. So that would be one approach where you would have Terrence Gray as the general manager and his main thing, because, as one of you brought up, Hunter brought up about the player evaluation, that if you had someone whose main focus as the general manager was the draft, working with the director of college scouting, and also evaluating the best free agent fits, evaluating every other team. This is something that somebody else is responsible for in a front office. The general manager knows every team and every player and so forth, but he's also has someone working on that, like studying every other team's salary cap situation, strengths and weaknesses, potential for their draft, potential for their free agency. Those are jobs in a front office. So if Terrence Gray is running that side of it, evaluating all the free agents who are coming out, evaluating all the draft options, the needs of all the 32 teams to try to project what's going to happen and so forth, and what trades might be able to be out there. And then Rob is over the top managing the assets and making sure that they sustain for a longer term vision, making sure that they have enough draft capital, enough cap space, that they're spending it wisely and not just trying to be too short term or whatever. And then also being that connection to the Wilfs, which is the Wilfs call in from New Jersey on a Zoom, and Rob Brzezinski can give them a full and honest picture of what's happening inside the franchise because he's got their trust and he can do that, right? Like that communication is very clear between him and the Wilfs, for the fact that not only did they trust him with this, they trusted him with final say, which I thought that said a lot about how they feel about Rob Brzezinski, is that they gave him final say on roster stuff as the interim GM over the coach, over the defensive coordinator who has a lot of power. So I thought that said a lot. And that's why I like the idea. I like your idea. Someone who's focused on the minutia of it, hey, this guy has the right, arm length and quick twitch and oily hips and whatever else to fit Brian Flores' system. And then Rob Brzezinski saying, this is the right amount of money to spend. This is the right amount of draft capital to spend on X, Y, and Z. That would be a good, situation. And then when the Wilfs want to know, well, how is Kevin O'Connell interacting with Terrence Gray? They have someone who could give them a true picture of what's really going on. So I like that on a lot of levels. Ron says John McKay for GM, Rob Brzezinski for president. Answers only to Ziggy and Mark. Yeah, I like that part of it. We've talked about that a lot. But, McKay's an interesting one because McKay is on now, when we say young, we're not talking about like 22 years old or something. Like every one of these guys has been in a front office for a decade or more, and they've been really good teams. That's why they're up for general manager positions. McKay is probably the most green of the group when it comes to, he hasn't been an AGM for very long. He did work his way up through the Rams front office, which I'm sure is a very competitive environment. And what you'd like to see is that they bring in, if they're going outside, from a team that has a lot of ideas that you can steal, just to be honest, right? Like if there's a team that you look at and you say, we'd like to steal most of the way that you do things, Philly would be one, but Philly is such a Howie Roseman. It's like, that's him. So if you can't steal him, I don't know if you get the same exact thing. But with someone like the Rams, they're if you will, again, I'm trying to avoid cliches here, but they are like a process-oriented type team. They are a more technologically forward team. They have a certain way that they coach and they scheme that's always one step ahead. Like you can think of a bunch of things where Sean McVay and Les Snead were kind of the first doing this. They nailed their window to get their Super Bowl. And I'm not saying teams didn't work in winning windows before, but it really feels like when the Rams won in 2021, that's when there was this ultra focus on winning windows are everything in the NFC, where Tom Brady won a Super Bowl and then, got out of town. But where it's not Roethlisberger, Manning, and Brady, it's not Mahomes, Allen, Jackson. It's who's going to build the best roster and then identify the right time to strike. The Rams were ahead of the game there, not playing starters in preseason for health purposes, something KOC has brought over. I think it was very smart for them. And even playing 11 personnel all the time. And I know this is a McVay thing, but it's like a way of thinking. How can we be a little bit different? So McVay gets the job. They run 11 personnel almost exclusively. And then they just switch when it worked for them differently, when they had tight end depth, and then they do something different. It's like we see this from Brian Flores, where some of the best coaches know how to be different. And I think O'Connell could push that needle a little bit more. I was looking at pre-snap motion before runs. Yes, this is what I was doing today. I was looking at pre-snap motion before runs, and the Miami Dolphins ran away with the league for the most pre-snap motion on running plays. And I just thought, when are the Vikings ever on the outside of one of these charts? Unless it's Brian Flores and his blitzing and his zone coverage and his too deep. Like it's always kind of with a lot of things, with salary cap space. It's been in, toward the bottom in the drafting stuff, but like when are they ever running away from the league in some sort of element of uniqueness? And I think that anyone who comes from the Rams, and John McKay would be that guy, that's part of the ethos, is to just be quite a bit different. The Joker says the one offseason it was most appropriate to go all in. Circumstances dictated a lukewarm approach. Hilarious and groundbreaking work by the Vikings as always. Man, Joker, not kidding around, I guess, with that take. Was it right to go all in this year, and in what way? Like when you look at free agency, just for example, and you look at the actual prices people paid for free agency, because I think it's easy to say this, or say, well, why didn't they trade for Dexter Lawrence? Like, trade what? He went for the 10th overall draft pick. Were you giving up your number 18 and then more than that to reach number 10? Because I think you would have had to given up, I don't know, like a second or a third and next year's second. I mean, it would have been a lot to get Dexter Lawrence. You would have been selling a lot of your future down the river for one player who did not produce last year very much for the New York Giants. I don't know if that, I think he was an awesome player, and I'm not, downgrading how good he is, but is that like really the right way to go? I'm not sure. And then in free agency, I mean, they just did this last year, dude. They just went and they said, well, no, this guy who's kind of broken and hasn't produced in a while, no, he'll be better for us. Yes, his team did let him go. And yes, he did demand more money than we should have ever paid for him. But sure, it's fine. It'll work. We're us. It'll work. They didn't do that this year. The prices were extremely high, and they did get several free agents that will help them. We can't forget Ryan Vandermark, by the way. I know it's not huge right now, but it could be for them. And in the draft, well, there wasn't some crazy big time move. I, of course, would have maybe preferred the wide receiver, but then they addressed that right after. So they did go big on the first round draft pick. Which free agents do you think that were coming in at the prices and the sacrifice that you have to make long term? I'm not sure, because when I was looking at free agency and doing that whole thing on sticktothemodel.com, I was signing mostly guys that were just okay players that I thought could kind of fill out the roster a little. I wasn't able to come up with how you're going to make some huge signing. Like, you weren't getting Tyler Linderbaum. You didn't have the money. So you were getting, I don't know, Cade Mays, who went to Detroit and will probably be okay and not that much better than Blake Brandel. So I'm not sure. You'll have to let me know. Scamping around, like the offseason, I've come around on the draft. Rob has been with the Wills for 20 plus years, so I would bet it's him. Steve says, just want one guy making final decisions. Honestly, don't want any part of another triangle of authority. When you look at the successful front offices, they don't use that model. There are front offices that do have the president as the final decision maker. But yeah, I mean, but most people know that, right? Like that is the person who is at the top. They're making the final call, or they're giving the thumbs up or thumbs down to what their front office has come up with. And, it was that way with Rick, and there was a lot of successes because of that when Rick was the general manager. So, I don't think that there's any one perfect way to do this. One like lock dead, lock solid, hey, this is the one and only way to do this. I don't think that that's the case in the NFL, but I do agree with you that someone has to be the one with, how they say, the coaches will say that has the pencil last, right? When they're talking about checks and changes at the line of scrimmage, you want someone that is holding the pencil when decisions are made. And that's very clear to everyone that if you're going to do something, it's this guy who's going to give you the plus or the minus, this guy who's going to say yes or no, and that's where it stops. And there's no debate, and there's no, well, we wanted it this way, and we wanted it that way, and that person's responsible for this move, and this person didn't do enough for that. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. So in general, I tend to strongly agree with you, Steve. I have not yet given a FanDuel question of the day. So yesterday, we were talking about the quarterback battles, right? The starting quarterbacks, and whether it's a true competition or not, which is going to go back and forth, I think, and we'll see what happens in OTAs and minicamp. I saw Cleveland, they were doing all sorts of stats for OTAs and minicamp, and I'm like, okay, I guess. I don't expect us to be clear by the end of OTAs who QB1 really is. I think that they'll mix and match and that kind of thing, but around the league, let me give you FanDuel's other starting quarterback battles. And this is the FanDuel question of the day. The Arizona Cardinals, Jacoby Brissett is the favorite in Arizona at minus 340. The Atlanta Falcons, where Tua is the favorite at minus 120. Cleveland, Deshaun Watson, the favorite at minus 196. Kansas City is really more of a health situation than a quarterback battle. So let's move on from that one. And Los Angeles, Kirk is the favorite at minus 310 to be the starting quarterback there. And I mentioned the other day, Kyler Murray minus 1,000 to be the favorite. So out of all those quarterback battles, the one that the markets are not buying is really in Minnesota. But what's your other favorite quarterback battle around the NFL is your FanDuel question of the day. Okay, back to your questions and comments. Derek says, I think Reed Burckhardt would be a solid general manager. His experience with growing a solid team around a decent quarterback may elevate us. Well, yeah, I mean, look, I know Reed a little bit, not a ton. I mean, you sort of bump into people along the way in the organization and get to know them a little bit. But I do know what's been said about Reed when he was here, which I think they all had the sense that he was on his way and would eventually be in a position to be an AGM or to be a general manager. And it says a lot that, George Payton decided to take Reed with him when he went to the Denver Broncos. and then elevated him as well after a couple of years. And they've just done an amazing job of building that roster. They drafted the quarterback, they put together the offensive line, and they have built a stout defense. And a lot of that is through the draft, but then other smart decisions along the way and identifying players along the way. And they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And really the first build when Reed was just coming into the Vikings organization, and it was 2012, you get this key guy, and 13, you get that key guy, and then 14, a couple of key guys, and 15, a bunch of key guys. Like, it is a year after year thing. And that's when, Rach was talking about what's the vision. Well, the vision needs to be more than 1 year. And it was when Kwesi got here. But I also think that the execution at times was not the way to sustain longer term, right? So it was the execution of, hey, you're going for it in 2022 because you should. And it's the last year of all those old players. You might as well see if it was Zim's fault. And then 23, you took a lot of it down. Like, that's smart. Then in 24, you draft your quarterback and you sign some players that really work for you. That's great. So that type of vision, it got to a point where it had worked. But along the way, there were these cracks in the foundation that it turned out were kind of ready to fall through. And one of it was when you fail on so many draft picks and when you give away so many draft picks, then you don't have anything underneath. It's like 17 undrafted free agents or whatever underneath this group of highly paid star players, or guys that, like Jefferson and Darisaw that Rick drafted, or Brian O'Neill, and then a bunch of free agents. And then you're just praying that it all works out around your young quarterback. So you don't want to be in a situation next time where just praying is the thing that you're doing. You want to have this 3 or 4 year type of build. And I don't mean that you're not trying to win along the way or maybe making adjustments. I just mean that every one of these teams that we look at on the NFC side that goes to a Super Bowl, you can usually trace it back 2 or 3 years to, well, they started building this team when they drafted this guy. And then the next year they got these 2 or 3. And then the next year they signed this free agent. It wasn't just, oh my gosh, it's time, we win. Like that's not usually how it works. And for the Vikings to get 14 in 2024, that I think was a result in them having a multi-year plan to take it down and build it back up. But then after that, it was, well, hey, who needs that? Like, who needs cap space in the future? Let's just sign everybody we can, keep everybody we can, because now it's go time under JJ McCarthy, which I understand, but they didn't have that other part of it that was any sort of backup plan. It was pretty much, this has to work, and it did not. So appreciate you, Beaver's best friend, on the like and subscribe. Hey, we're working toward 16,000 subscribers, and it has been great to see that number continuing to grow through this offseason. It's been so interesting. So if you do have a chance to like and subscribe, then please do that, and check out the newsletter at purpleinsider.football. We'll have all of the OTA coverage, which will start next week. So we got, the date, you could Google the dates, but we're starting to get when media is going to be out there. So next week, for sure, we'll be doing a recap podcast of everything that I saw and learned at OTAs. So I'm excited about that. Joker, how do you structure bringing in a GM and keeping Rob as president? If the new GM has more roster decision-making power, but Rob is higher on the totem pole as an asset manager and proxy owner, how is that supposed to work in practice? Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that if they decide to do, we're going to have to get a very clear answer about. The way it usually works around the NFL would be that your general manager is operating most of the day-to-day stuff roster-wise, right? So you are the one that's beating the bushes for which draft picks you're looking at for the next year. You're the one that's evaluating the rest of the NFL for potential free agents and even small moves within a season, like who might come available, who did another team cut. Like you forget how many guys you have to kind of bring in. Who's on your practice squad? Who's on every other team's practice squad? And what do you think of all of them? And is there anybody that you can, like, they once upon a time found Rashad Hill, who I know didn't turn out to be a star, but he played in the Minneapolis Miracle game. Like, that was just a guy that they found. So that's your general manager and what you're doing, along with working together with the coaching staff and Rob and the ownership to come up with big picture plans. So that's what you're doing as the general manager. And then Rob is overseeing that entire process. And I think continuing to be guardrails. And it doesn't mean that Rob's sitting in his office being like, no, to like every move that they're trying to do. I don't mean that. I mean that Rob would be the one that is extremely detailed about that side of the cap and draft capital management. So, and at the end of the day, being a proxy to ownership, he would have the veto power to say, I know you want to make this. Let's just say they want to do something crazy. Let's say they wanted to sign Tyreek Hill after he heals up. Okay. I think that's where you would have Rob being the advisor to the Wilfs and on the same page with them and say, you know what? I get where you guys are coming from a coaching and a player evaluation standpoint, but we don't want Tyreek Hill in the building. So just as an example, or, hey, the general manager has the Texans on the phone. They've worked out a trade for, I don't know who. And you're going to give up this much and you're going to get back this much. And that's where Rob can say, I understand what you're getting at, but that's giving up too much and we're just not going to do it. Or yes, absolutely. This is the right price. This is the right management. And we're going to do it. So having kind of like a checks and balances along the way, like a general manager assisting and checking the coaching staff, who's always going to want more veteran talent right away. And then Rob checking the general manager of, all right, well, are you pushing too many chips into the middle of the table? Or are you not being aggressive enough to come to that person and say, we need to make the big move now because it's our moment or whatever it might be. So I think that that's how you would want it to work out. But it's a great question. I mean, that's how I'm envisioning it, but I don't know for sure until we actually get there. Derek says too much Kevin may not be a good thing. So you mean like if they hire John McKay and then you're giving presumably a lot of influence to the coaching staff. I can see where you're coming from there. And, I'm not saying you would want O'Connell and the general manager to be on completely different wavelengths because we kind of saw that over the last few years, but do you want somebody who can, as I was just saying, so who could sort of check that person or somebody in the GM spot? And this is what happened in Buffalo. Sean McDermott was hired by the previous general manager. He was hired by Doug Whaley. And so part of clearly Brandon Beane's job was to evaluate the coach and report to ownership. And when he decided it was time to move on from the coach, then they did. Do you want that person? Do you want a GM, if it's Nolan Teasley or whoever it might be from the outside, Reed Burckhardt, do you want them, or Rob would be in this position too, to be in a spot where they're evaluating the coach as much as they're working with him? Or do you want someone, if it's John McKay, who would be very familiar, and I would say he wouldn't do this just because he's from the Rams, but he'd be more familiar with Kevin O'Connell. Do you want O'Connell to have a lot of influence there and be working closely? I could see it either way. Because I don't think O'Connell's a coach that you want to get rid of. So yes, I understand what you're saying because you don't want a coach going, hey dude, come on, just like get me one more of this or make that one more trade. Like just, do this I need this, whatever, if it's not the right decision to make. But I feel like that's making kind of assumptions. But that connection is notable for sure. Joker, we basically need to get much better at drafting. That's what's been missing the last decade. We get free agent deals. Throwing away picks is a factor in our draft failure. 100%. Throwing away picks is a huge factor because when I looked at it right after Kwesi was fired, I wanted to really understand it. I wanted to fully get it. Like what happened here with the draft? And the conclusion that I came to was based on historical hit rates for each section of the draft. So, if it's later in the draft, it'd be like in this section of 20 or 30 picks. If it's early in the draft, it's like this section of 5 or 10. Like, what are the hit rates? And PFF had done that maybe 2-3 years ago. So I took their chart and their percentage chance of a hit for each draft pick that the Vikings took, like their selection. So they had number 32, and what were the odds of number 32 turning out to be a good starter. And what I ended up landing on was that the Vikings were about average for what was expected for those draft picks. But since they had so few of them, average is bad. Like average, they needed to be much better than average. If you were going to have that few draft picks, you needed to hit on way more than your percentage was, which sort of shows you the process not being great. Like to give away all those draft picks and constantly be hoping that you hit. But when we talk about some of these guys, I mean, it's like what happened with McKay Blackman. Like McKay Blackman was like the 105th pick in the draft. I mean, I don't know. He was the 105th pick of the draft is what happened. Your odds aren't good at that point. That's why kind of going to battle over Jacoby Thomas with draft analysts is not worth it, because like that draft pick has like a 20% chance or less. It's probably less of becoming a starter. Even when you get to that, it's probably like 20%. And then you go beyond that and it's under 10. It's like you can't really haggle too much with, those types of things. But if you have 3/3 and each one of them has 20% chance to hit, well, there's a better odds that one of them becomes a good player for you. But if that's your only pick for day 2, good luck. Or you have no picks for day 2, good luck. Well, Kobe King better hit, huh? Kobe King's a 5th round or 6th round draft pick. Like, what are the chances that the guy even becomes anything? So, that you're right. Like it is stockpiling, but it also is, it needs to have a higher hit rate, because you're not going to win in the NFL if you hit the average markers every time. And you might view it, if you're a pro Rob person, you might view it as, well, this draft, the Vikings leaned into fit. They leaned into, let's get the coaches completely on board with each one of these guys, and their chances of those coaches pouring into them and developing them and finding fits for them is maybe higher if they believe in it than it is. And we saw this from Mike and Rick. Did Mike pour into Kellen Mond? No. In fact, he dunked on him harder than I've ever seen in my entire life. What about, I don't know, Wyatt Davis or Chaz Surratt, who's still kicking around somewhere? I mean, these aren't great players, but did Mike Zimmer seem in that draft to be all in on those guys? Like, I'm going to do anything it takes to get this guy to succeed. You want that from your coaching staff, not why the heck did you pick that guy, right? You need to have that. And I think Rob was able to create that. Maybe there is maybe there is something to that, a hack to having your coaching staff all in. Steven Brzezinski's interview could be done before Memorial Day weekend. Four next week, we should get a decision by June 1st. That's kind of what I've been thinking, is somewhere in that range. I'm hoping so. It's can't really plan the travel schedule when they're looking for a GM. I think that's probably right. And it's a good time to get your GM because you get more cap space after June 1st. And there are still a number of free agents out there that I know a general manager are you going to walk in the building and start signing people? Maybe not. But I think part of your plan as you're presenting to the Wilfs and Kevin O'Connell and so forth would be to talk about current improvements. It's not just 2027 and beyond. It's, hey, can you get Leonard Floyd? Do you want Donovan Wilson? I don't know. Like, those are guys that stand out to me. But if you add 2-3 more pieces to this roster, like, how strong is it? And you've got a little cap space to use. So who do you want? Like, who do you think would be a good fit as part of the conversation? I'm a twerk. 1A is Teasley. 1B is Brzezinski. Joker says Teasley if I had to pick. Yeah, I mean, that's right. It's hard to say, like, hey, I love this guy. I love Lamp. I mean, because you're just picking from names and resumes. We haven't seen them GM. We can only know where they came from, but we don't know how they talk to people, how they communicate. With Kwesi, he had sort of a ready-made label on him when he got here. Hey, this is the analytics GM. It never really played out to be that way. And first press conference, he was really great in front of the media and his ideas sounded good and everything else. And overall, a lot of that stuff did get executed and they won 14 games and so forth. So, any talk of that being a total disaster when he was here is not really fair. Plus, they kept most of the roster together that he built. So if they really hated it, they would have gotten rid of a lot of the guys that were there. It was about a lot of other stuff, but that's my point, is that you don't really know sitting here. It's not like if your team hires Mike McCarthy. If your team hires Mike McCarthy as a head coach, you know exactly what you're getting into. And the same if your team signs a free agent. You sign Jawan Jennings, we can all just go watch Jawan Jennings. Can't do that with a general manager. I don't know. I don't know how he's going to be in pressure situations where you got to make a really tough decision or whatever. And they're taking just a guess. But what is nice about Teasley, and I've also, Steven, watched some of the stuff that, Teasley has done some interviews and things like that, in terms of explaining himself, and also, but he doesn't come across like a used car salesman, like football guy. But I think where the Seahawks really shine is that they understood how to put together a roster over several seasons in a non-panicky type of way. And their player evaluation in terms of their fit for their coach, I mean, they just couldn't have done any better than a Nick Emanware. Like, they couldn't have done better than building kind of an edge group that could rotate. DeMarcus Lawrence, knowing something was left there, knowing what Leonard Williams was going to bring to the table. Byron Murphy, the fat Byron Murphy, as a defensive tackle, and that kind of fit. Boye Mafe and his fit. I mean, a lot of those guys, they went and got Ernest Jones, and this is a small thing, right? But Ernest Jones is a linebacker in Tennessee, maybe wasn't doing that a whole heck of a lot, but in Seattle was a perfect fit for a guy playing with a defensive line like that in front of him. Those are the small things that I think, Flores really gets and O'Connell really gets, and it has to be executed. But the part about, over multiple years of hitting on draft picks, or even just finding guys, you don't need to hit on every draft pick for a home run, but even just role players, seeing the vision for that, and how they could develop. Like, that's something Seattle's just done extremely, extremely well. And this is with the recognition that the draft is largely random. But one thing I was thinking about over the last couple of years is the draft has always been random, right? But I remember a conversation I had with Mike Renner, who works for CBS. I have a ton of respect for Renner. And he said, our percentages aren't getting higher overall, but they should be. Like, we have more information than ever. We have more data than ever. We have more tools at our disposal, and we have more people that work in front offices than ever looking at these groups. So even though the hit rates, weirdly, historically, have not shown themselves to change, they might be. Like, in real time, they might be changing. Teams might be getting small edges when it comes to the draft by making certain decisions. I mean, even the consensus board thing, if you're using that to double check yourself, your percentages are going to be higher than they are if you're not. So things like that, we don't really fully understand yet, and we may be seeing teams get an edge there. It's also an edge to have more draft picks. That we absolutely know. Hunter's a Rob supporter. Joker, it's a very complicated dynamic. You want Rob involved in some way, and you want the coaches, specifically B-Flow, heavily involved in the scouting, and you can't tank. So how much am I doing if I'm hired? Oh, I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, no, there's a lot. There's a lot. I see what you're saying in terms of making final decisions where you have Rob at the top with the gavel, and you have a big push from the coaches to want X, Y, and Z. But I think what maybe people don't always understand is just how much on a daily basis goes into tracking all of the moving parts, whether it's the, college season where you have dozens of scouts who are on the road, or however many it is, a dozen scouts that are on the road in different areas that are bringing back evaluations, and you're tracking those, and you're tracking all the player movement. You're preparing yourself for free agency. You're leading a building on a day-to-day basis, which means connecting with your coaches, solving their problems, dealing with other stuff. I remember hearing a story about Rick and I think it was like a sponsorship sign or something. Like, people don't realize how much the general manager has to do. There was I used to listen to a hockey show with the old Columbus Blue Jackets GM, who was their GM when they first started as a franchise. And they were asking him about whether they could bring in this giant cannon and shoot it off every time they scored a goal. And like, he was the one that had to make the final call on that stupid cannon. So Like there's a lot to it. There's a lot of interpersonal stuff going on. You're managing a lot of different areas of the building. You have the health area, the strength and conditioning and all that stuff. You have agents where you have to have all sorts of relationships there. You have the analytics side of things, which if you're not managing the analytics side, you're not getting ahead. You're falling behind. So you need to understand what you're doing with that data and how to communicate with the data people because they are guiding you as much as anybody else and marrying that with your scouting stuff. So like there's a lot. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have a powerful defensive coordinator, no question, who's really good at his job. And you would have somebody over the top of you, which may be something that some GM candidates didn't love. If that's the way that they're going to go with it, I don't know. They might just make Rob the GM and go forward from there. Rach, I'd prefer someone with some sort of background in scouting and personnel, which Rob isn't. Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I would also say the guy who is the number one GM in the NFL, hands down, wasn't a scout. It's whether you have the people around you to present the right information and go in the right direction with the scouting. Because just the GM, now the GM is going to, if you're talking about these players to draft, 100 players to draft, like the GM is going to watch those guys and he's going to be involved in all that. But a lot of it is people bringing you the information as a GM, even when you're a scout. There are GMs who are on the record having said, I don't really watch a ton of tape. I think Eric DeCosta said he comes into the office on Saturdays because his Monday through Friday there's just not enough time to watch tape. So he goes into the office on Saturday to watch some tape on the side. Like that's how he's doing it. So I think it just tells you how much is going on. I wish there was like any of the 30 for 30 stuff or NFL films that really kind of show that day to day. There just have to be a lot of conversations that the public can't hear about different players and things like that. But the day to day is managing an entire building, just like if you worked at Target or something where you're the GM of that Target, but you have all sorts of different managers that you're communicating with and fires you're putting out and problems you're solving. It's not sitting at a computer and just typing in, I draft this guy because I like his tape. So there's a lot to it. Protas Ray Beats. I'm sorry if I messed that up. Just Matthew, just give it to us straight. Do you think we will win a playoff game this year? Well, I have no idea if you're going to win a playoff game. You have to get there first, but I think that they can. When we look at the spectrum of possibilities for this team, there's a really clear path to getting there and winning a playoff game. And that path looks like Kyler Murray fits in great with Justin Jefferson in the offense. They improve their run game to be more explosive. The defense hangs on for dear life with some of the issues it's probably bound to have, but gets a big step from Dallas Turner. The young players come in right away. Maybe you add a little bit of talent along the way. Flores does his scheme thing. You get some turnover luck, which they didn't really have last year, but they did the year before. Your kicker's great. Your punter's great. All of a sudden you're in the playoffs. And then it's all up to who you play. I mean, when we think about the 14-3 thing, it was crushing to have it go that way. But we think about like how often has that ever happened? The answer is never a clock, which is zero. No team has won 14 games, then had to go on the road. And then playing, a team that had rested the previous week, that had the one thing that you couldn't deal with, which was the interior guys. I mean, that just shows you how random this stuff can be a little bit, right? Where if you're San Francisco and you've got your full roster, how do you do against Seattle? Maybe a lot better. But instead, you had to go to Philly, you lose George Kittle, and then you got to go play the Seahawks at home. Like, good luck with that. So a lot of stuff does come down to just circumstance and matchup. The 2022 is the one where you should have a lot of regrets. Coaching perspective, of course, the Ed Donatel, but also, Kevin O'Connell as well in that game and the check down and everything. That one, like, that should have been a matchup that you could take care of. So you just don't know. Like if you match up with a team that got its quarterback, wasn't it when Derek Carr got hurt? Who was it? was it, I'm trying to think when Derek Carr got hurt at the end of the season, who started the playoff game? I honestly can't remember, but it was a backup quarterback that started the playoff game, and you get to face that, right? Or you're the Eagles in 2022 and you're pretty good, but you're not that great. And Brock Purdy tears his elbow in like the first quarter. Thank you for a free trip to the Super Bowl. Like, you just don't really know. So will they win a playoff game? I'm not sure. But I don't think that you have to do sort of backflips in order to get to a point where you can see them being there and being a favorite or being at home. I think it's possible. Stephen, while I don't think we certainly had a good or bad offseason, I think Rob kept the car on the road and didn't crash the car, but he didn't pull ahead and get to the destination in record time. So I guess my question would be, what would have done that? Like based on the opportunities that were there, based on the players that signed in different places. And I'm asking the question. I'm not being rhetorical. Like what would have gotten them to a different spot? Because they did sign a top 15 quarterback, which would really move the needle quite a bit. Like, I understand not saying it's not some aggressive, crazy offseason, but the difference in expected points added with Kyler Murray as your quarterback based on his history versus they were minus 40 points as a passing attack. Negatives don't happen that much for passing attacks, but it did for the Vikings last year. And just to put that in context, when Kyler's been good, it's been around plus 60. So it's like that's a 100-point swing if you go from where your quarterback play was to just the average version of Kyler Murray. Could be a 100-point swing, not to mention his running, which has been very effective as well. So, I mean, that's not a Rob thing, but it is maybe a belief from the entire organization that if you get the quarterback who is a plus 50 or 60 expected points added versus what you had last year, that you're going to go from 9-8 to 11 wins, right? Even if we bake in some regression on the defense and some of the things that did go right. So maybe it wasn't called for to do a lot of crazy things when you're getting the biggest thing that could be a difference maker at the quarterback position. But I am curious, like what you think, because yeah, there were free agents, but the prices weren't great. And the sacrifice would have been pretty serious for the future. And you are going to continue to have a team. So yeah, I kind of go back and forth there. Beaver's best friend. As much as I like Rob, I think I'd rather have a fresh outside perspective just to have some new blood. Recycling the same employees from 10 years ago feels a little too safe. I think that that's fair. I think it's totally fair. It is totally fair to say Rob is really good at his job and he deserves a lot of respect. But at the same time, this model, this franchise run by these people has not gotten an edge. It has not gotten ahead. So is there a John McKay or a Nolan Teasley who could get you ahead? I think that's completely fair. And I also appreciate your, in terms of making your case, your rationality and your approach to making your case to not wanting Rob. I appreciate that. Bryson, JJ McCarthy will be eligible for his 5th-year option after this season. Will they pick it up? Not if he doesn't play much. I mean, it really depends. It's kind of on not just him, but also on the randomness, footballness gods. I mean, Kyler Murray is most likely to start. As you saw when I was reading out those odds, I mean, you know, the FanDuel folks are not buying the true competition there when it's minus 1,000 for Kyler Murray to be the starter. I am not so much either myself. So if Kyler Murray starts and plays 17 games and wins 11 of them and wins a playoff game, then no, you're not picking up the 5th-year option. If Kyler Murray plays 8, gets hurt for the season, McCarthy comes in, plays the final 8 games, wins 6 of them, gets you into the playoffs, shows everything you were looking for, then yeah. So it's totally fluid. It really depends on Murray's health, Murray's performance. Where it could be a difficult spot is if they really like what they saw behind the scenes, but he only played like 2 games. The 5th-year option is not insanely expensive at quarterback, but it's expensive. So you got to really make your call there. I mean, it's a very difficult spot to be in to try to make that call, but I think that you would lean today that the odds are maybe 75% that they don't pick up the 5th-year option just because of where things stand. And of course, if he doesn't beat out Carson Wentz for QB2, and Carson is standing over there with his helmet ready to go if Kyler gets hurt, then, it's completely out of the question. So you could see anything on the table there for the 5th-year option. Brian, if you assume that Kyler does well this year, the key for the next GM is navigating the contract while keeping the rest of the team viable. I think Rob is probably the best person for that. No matter what happens, Rob deserves a ton of credit for setting them up to have the ability to do that. And one thing that I have noticed is that this would have been a terrifying scenario, I think 5 years ago, where, like if he plays well, he's going to demand $50 million and we are mega screwed. I just don't look at it that way now. I was looking yesterday and I can't remember the exact numbers, but I'll get them close. It was something like there's 10 quarterbacks that are getting between 50 and 60, and there's 7 quarterbacks between 40 and 50, and there's 4 quarterbacks between 30 and 40, right, million per year. And that shows you that we've created something that wasn't there before when Kirk signed his deal, where it is tiers of how much these guys get paid. And there is precedent for Kyler Murray. Now, he may just, I want the moon and someone will give it to me and I don't care about the Vikings or whatever. I don't know. I know nothing about Kyler and his personality because I haven't met him yet. And I don't know how he thinks or how his agent thinks about this situation. If he's thinking, I'm going to go to the Vikings and play great for a year and then go sign the deal of my life, or if he's like, no, I want to be a Viking long term. But let's just assume that Viking long term makes sense to him. This is already laid out. If you have kind of 1 year and there's flaws in your past, a Baker Mayfield, a Sam Darnold, you are more in the $30 to $40 million range. Daniel Jones got 44. His cap hit this year is much less than that. But technically average annual value was 44. So that may be the precedent for this. You're in that ballpark. It may depend on how he plays, but you're not in that this contract is so big you can't do anything with it. And I think I counted up, someone can double check, 5 out of the 7 teams in the NFC playoffs have quarterbacks on a second contract at least. So, you can build around it. You should, with the levers you could pull, but also that there has been more of a tier system of quarterbacks created than there once was. Scott says the obvious 2 for me would be the Rams AGM in Seattle. I really like Rob, but would rather he stays the cap strategist and promote him to president. I like that idea. I like having a Nolan Teasley or John McKay come in with, it's not just that Rob's the one to say no to those guys. Like, hey man, no, you're not making that big trade. Like, that's not just his job. It's also someone who has been there for a very long time who can also guide that person. So if John McKay becomes the GM or Nolan Teasley, or Reed Burckhardt, they are still on the younger side, still on the inexperienced side. These guys have only been AGMs for a short period of time. It has not been like, 15 years as an AGM, he finally got his chance. It's like 2. So if they're coming in and they have someone like Rob overseeing them, working with them closely, I think that that's a really good pair to have, rather than, it did feel like, Kwesi was kind of coming in, figure it out. You had Ryan Grigson, but, come figure it out, win over the front office yourself. Maybe that wouldn't be the case if Rob is up over the top and can oversee the process of that person implementing what they want to get done as people coming from different organizations. So I like that. Taslio says, disagree that Grenard trade was bad value. It was bold, opened up cap space so we could get Juwan Jennings. Also let Turner move up in the rotation. I tend to agree with you on Grenard. There's things I like about it and there's things I don't like about it. Number one, I don't like not having Jonathan Grenard because he's good, but he's had injuries in his past and his pressure did not turn into sacks last year. And if that trend continues and you give him $50 million more guaranteed, which is at least 2 more years on this, and then you have Dallas Turner not being able to find a true position for himself, that's not a great scenario. When you just add it up, on one hand and then in the other, like a scale, and you have 2 top 100 draft picks and $34 million in cap space, or a player that you really like, but was not in the same tier as your Myles Garrett or your irreplaceable players. And he was a guy that another team let go at some point. And, the Vikings signed him and they pick up Danielle Hunter in Houston, and he's been incredible. But, the point just being that he's always been someone who's really, really good, but is not necessarily on the same level as some of the true ultra game changers. So 2/3, $34 million in cap space. As you said, Juwan Jennings right away, but it's also going to depend. Do you sign someone who's a premier free agent next year or make a trade? That's the thing. The Vikings have not really been in positions where they could make a trade to acquire a top-notch talent because they have been pressed against the cap quite a bit from the free agent spending. Thank you so much, Leonard, for the super chat. And thank you, Steven, for thanking Leonard for the super chat, because sometimes I don't see them for like 20 minutes, and that is my bad. But thank you very much, Leonard. I appreciate it. And all of the support from all of you guys all the time. I mean, it is May 20th, and we're having a great football conversation. I love that. Don't forget to throw in there into the comment section your answer to FanDuel question of the day, which is, what is your most intrigue in terms of quarterback battles that is not the Minnesota Vikings? That is your FanDuel question of the day. And they have odds for a bunch of different quarterback battles, including the Arizona Cardinals, where Jacoby Brissett did not come to OTAs because he wants more money after going 1-11 last year. I mean, shoot your shot. You should. But what? Skull Shadows, stars win games, and more importantly, playoff games. Other than Jefferson, this team has no stars. Some are really good, but not game changers. That's why national media says mid or bad. I've had this thought, myself, Skull Shadow, for sure, just about in drafting Caleb Banks. This is where what my approach has become after many years now of doing this and being right sometimes and being wrong sometimes, is to just look at everything as, well, let me try to understand it first. And let me think about the different ways it could play out. And then we'll look at those and the odds. And then I'll decide kind of, do we like it? Do we not like it? And with Caleb Banks, he's an example of what you're saying. Is it's not just stars, which you're absolutely right. Stars win games and they don't have many. I would say Van Ginkel is a star player for sure. I mean, he was a second team All-Pro, and I think Dallas Turner has the potential and is en route to being that. But there are a lot of players who are just pretty good. I would also toss Brian O'Neill, Christian Darrisaw. Like, both those guys are at their best. They're stars. Darrisaw is a top 5 tackle in the league at his best. So it's not the only one is Jefferson. But the Vikings have been lacking in freakiness. And maybe this needs to be a data point, an analytic that is created by the Purple Insider podcast, which is, how freaky is your football team? Because when I look at Seattle or the Rams, it's pretty freaky. You have a lot of guys who you go, how do you deal with that dude? That's just like when they had Aaron Donald. What exactly in the world are you supposed to do with that? And Justin Jefferson has been that in his career. How in the world are you supposed to stop Justin Jefferson? How in the world are you supposed to stop Andrew Van Ginkel? Really? I mean, on a week-to-week basis, the guy's an impact player everywhere when he's at his best and he's healthy. Adrian Peterson, Randy Moss, like even guys who don't have to fall into the Hall of Fame category over the years. Everson Griffin's not going to make the Hall of Fame, but what in the world were you supposed to do in 2017 to block Everson Griffin? Nothing. How many of those guys do the Vikings have? And that's a reason to draft Caleb Banks, is so the other team, when they show up and they get off the bus, they go, well, that's going to be a long day. Even if he's not perfect, it's going to be a long day dealing with a guy who's 6'6", 330, and has the grip strength to crush a tree. Like, it's a reason to draft him, right? And I think that you are onto something with the freaky factor has not been there. It's a lot of IQ, a lot of smart players, a lot of guys who have squeezed every ounce out of their talent. Josh Metellus, Aaron Jones, later round draft picks. We love those guys, but they're not freaky. And I think you do need some Nick Eamon-Warre and Boye Mafe and Leonard Williams in order to get to the Super Bowl. So I think it's an interesting point. They need to keep that in mind. And that is something about like Seattle that, I mean, the draft picks that they got, they're all freaky. They're all like crazy athletes. And the Vikings probably have been a little short on that. It's a good point. Joker, my biggest problem with Rob seems too nice. Yeah, I don't know about that. Being nice isn't a GM trait. I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying. Like there needs, like Howie Roseman or Leslie, there's some cockiness there, but they've also won. Rob is a nice guy. I can confirm through sources such as me knowing Rob that he is a very nice guy, but, I don't agree with the last part. Seems too interested in keeping the Vikings way of not losing instead of winning. That I just don't agree with that. I don't. I think, in fact, in conversations with Rob that we had at the NFL Combine, I think he carries it as much as you. I think that he is super aware of, and I just, the first part, look, I mean, we shouldn't be judging a GM based on whether he comes across nice in the media or whether I've had good interactions with him. I mean, I think this offseason showed that you can have a leadership trait to be able to kind of put your foot down when it's the right time to put the foot down, or to sell, everybody on where you're going with, right? Like this is the right way to move on from Jonathan Grenard and pull that trade. And I thought that took, because you could have just left it. You could have just said, you know what? Hold out, next GM's problem. But instead, like, no, we're resolving this problem the way I want to do it. So I wouldn't mistake his kindness for weakness, for sure. I don't think he would be around if he was just sort of the, the pushover type. But I totally disagree with that other part from knowing Rob. I think that it weighs super heavy on him because he knows the fans. He is not originally from Minnesota, but I also know this feeling that you become a Minnesotan and you understand how close they've gotten so many times. You understand all the winning seasons that didn't come to fruition. So I think that he gets that as much as anybody, or more than anybody, because he's been through the entire journey. And he's talked about that a little bit too. So yeah, I don't see it that way. I see it differently. Steven, I'm glad Grigson wasn't a serious candidate and wasn't one of the finalists. Don't hate him, but don't want him having too much say on the on-field personnel. Yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. I mean, when he's the AGM, does he kind of move on somewhere else, take on a different position? Because if you get named the GM, you're going to want to bring in your own assistant GM. That's pretty much, even Kwesi was able to do that with Grigson and Demetrius Washington. So whoever they hire, if it's Rob, then, maybe Grigson stays if it's Rob, if they like that relationship. But if it's somebody from the outside, they're very likely to bring in their own person. Just going to call you Prod Beats because I'm not, you can tell me how to pronounce it. Rob actually gives a damn personally about the team and organization. Others may not be emotionally tied to being successful. I think that he gets it in terms of the way he's going to communicate with the Wilfs and the fan base and so forth. Probably communicating with the fans most importantly, because he gets it. But I mean, if you're talking about guys who have Super Bowl rings in John McKay and Nolan Teasley, and Terrence Gray has been darn close with Buffalo a number of times. I mean, anybody who comes in here, like that's goal one. That's the only goal. That's the motivation. But I think that there's a special understanding that goes along with it and the ownership and everything that this fan base has been through. Rick says Brzezinski did a great job with the few guys drafting and knows how to pay a team. He's the guy that should be GM. Where I stand on it, it's because it's so hard to, after we've had, all this conversations, like where have I settled? I think where I've settled is if they name Rob Brzezinski the general manager, that I'm very comfortable with the idea that he can put together a multi-year plan that is much more focused on proper spending, much more focused on acquiring draft capital and building through that side than in the previous regime, and much more longer term. And I don't mean 10 years. I mean like 3 years, 4 years type of approach that they can get an advantage of him being the best there is when it comes to the salary cap management. And I think what goes along with that is draft capital management and when to make trades and when not to. And I think you get an advantage there also from the connection with Flores and Kevin O'Connell. Now you don't want to do it just because they want him as the GM, but I think to have credibility with those guys is not the easiest thing, because you have a coach who's won coach of the year. You have a defensive coordinator who is, as I think strong of a personality as you will find in the entire NFL, but is also as good at evaluation as you'll find, but he's not perfect, right? So you also need to have the belief and trust in those guys that if you say as the general manager, Brian, I get where you're coming from, but I don't think that's the right move right now, that you're not causing headbutting and so forth, that there's a respect there when it comes to those decisions. So I feel very comfortable with the idea that Rob would be the top guy in charge, but there is something pulling me from the other side that says, boy, Seattle does this right, man. Like even when they're not that great, they're still a heck of a team. Like they missed the playoffs 2 years ago. They were 10-7. And it was like, oh man, we totally failed in Seattle, right? Like you're 10-7 and you just missed the playoffs because of, I don't know how the cookie crumbled there in the NFC. That's a standard that they have in Seattle that you'd like to see here, which is like, they're aiming for Super Bowls. They're not aiming for 9-8, right? So the same thing kind of goes for Los Angeles. I kind of think of, and when I say like forward type of team, I don't mean like, and I'm sure that they're using AI and analytics and stuff. It doesn't have to be like that. It's just a team that's always kind of one step ahead of everybody else. Like, how do you get there? So I bounce back and forth a lot, and that's probably why I end up on just liking the idea of keeping Rob in a position of power with someone with new ideas. Taslios, FanDuel question of the day. Cleveland is your favorite team to watch their quarterback competition because no matter who wins, they lose. It's hard to believe that their quarterback competition is Deshaun Watson versus Shedeur Sanders in real life. It's just hard to believe. I mean, when they had Joe Flacco, it was sort of like, okay, well, at least it's Joe Flacco and, you know, you could have some good games. Maybe your team will be respectable. But then, you know, Dylan Gabriel, really? I kind of like Dylan Gabriel as a backup quarterback, but they just go to him pretty quickly instead of Shedeur. Then Shedeur is mostly bad at the end of the year, except against the Tennessee Titans. And now they're back to this road with a guy who's been as horrific as a quarterback and as a person, possibly, over the last number of years. I mean, really? Cleveland, man. Wouldn't wish it on anybody. And then the Cleveland Cavs blowing the game last night. Unbelievable. Unreal. No matter what happens to you in Minnesota, you're not Cleveland. Wayne says Brzezinski's number one with McKay from the Rams close second. Rob has shown an affinity for working. His leadership during the 26th draft and beyond has been exemplary. McKay is well deserving. Yeah. And I would say the same for all the guys in terms of being deserving. They all come from good franchises. They all come from different forms of scouting backgrounds. They all belong here. It's just, which direction do you want to go? I mean, do you want to go with a Reed Burckhardt who really knows Rob Brzezinski very, very well? Reed is a great evaluator from everything I've ever heard. But is he really like in a position right now after a very short amount of time as being an AGM, like to lead an entire franchise? But if he's doing it with Rob, who he knows from many years of working together, could that be a really good tandem? So I wouldn't write off anybody that's on this list. I think you can make a good argument for all of them. Steven, I do think the Raiders QB battle is the most interesting. That's the FanDuel question of the day. Don't think it's entirely possible for Mendoza not to be the starter week one, but if not, how long will he sit under Kubiak? Probably depends on the win-loss record for Kirk. I mean, Kirk should play. What always ends up happening in these quarterback competitions with the top pick and the veteran is the top pick is more talented. And so the coaches are like, oh man, we just can't go with the game manager. Like, this kid's going to be fine. Throw him in there. Anthony Richardson never should have been considered to start early in his Indianapolis career. But they're like, no, he looks so great. He's so physically gifted out on the field. This is fantastic. And then the guy's not ready, and look where you are. So I think they should ride Kirk until it's just intolerable. That's what happened with Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots. They rolled with Jacoby Brissett until it was basically intolerable. Like, we just cannot do this anymore. We got to go to the kid, and they put in Drake May. I would do that here. Beavers, Atlanta is a wide open competition. That really is, because I'm not a buyer that Tua is going to bounce back, but they do have a heck of a lot of weapons. And Penix, it's now or never for Penix. He overall in his early career did not play very well. An injury right off the bat, giving him a quarterback that he has to beat out was a good idea for Atlanta, but neither one of them is very compelling. Lake Erie Vike. Well, thank you for the compliment. Appreciate that very much. I'm glad that, so many of you are here having a good football conversation. Beavers. So what would my choice out of the 5 candidates be? I think if I had to make the choice and I don't get to sit down with them, I have begged to be a part of the committee. No one has invited me. Hey man, you cover the team for 10 years. I know it as well as any of these GM candidates. Just saying, Wilfs. But I think it would be, and I don't know them. Okay, so that's the tough part. I haven't sat down with them. I haven't listened to their ideas. It would probably be Rob as president and Nolan Teasley, because I think that's the right combination of leadership within the building and credibility for Rob, asset management for Rob, and also mentorship to somebody who's on a younger side in this business, but new ideas. And if your idea, your concept is, we are now the Minnesota Vikings who build through the draft, that doesn't mean we never spend, but it means we build through the draft. And look, this has been a Green Bay thing for a really long time. Green Bay builds through the draft. And you can hate Green Bay. You should. You're Vikings fans. You should despise them. But also, they're always in the conversation. They always are building teams that are not having these crazy, wild ups and downs, because they put so much focus into the draft. And Jordan Love's been really good for them. Each year they're in that discussion going into the playoffs, right? I'm not saying, hey, you want to be Green Bay, you want to be Seattle, you want to win the Super Bowl, but there are teams in the NFL that are just, their philosophy is, we build through the draft. And it seems that the Vikings want to shift to that way. So if you want to shift to that way, someone like Nolan Teasley, to me, makes a lot of sense. But you can make a case for Reed as well, as someone who came up in the college scouting world and has been on that side really strongly for Denver, and they've drafted great too. Denver shouldn't be knocked too far down behind Seattle. Denver is one Bo Nix ankle away from playing in that big game. So, each one of these guys has a good case for that, but I like the idea of pairing Rob's talents and his understanding of how the league works, his relationships, all that stuff, with somebody who's coming from a different organization, has different ideas. Taslios, I like all the GM picks better. When Ryan Poles was the front runner in 2022, I was sick. Had Carolina not been so bad, Poles would have tanked the Bears for nothing. Not for nothing. I mean, they would have built a strong roster just from tanking and created a good cap situation and so forth. Poles overall has done a pretty good job, but it's been hit or miss for me. This offseason's a big miss of not finding more defensive line talent. And his first coaching hire, my God, if they had brought in Ryan Poles and he had somehow ended up with Matt Eberflus here instead of Kevin O'Connell, and look, O'Connell's responsible for the Darnold thing, and O'Connell is responsible for the playoff record, and I get it, and we've talked about that a lot. But if you're giving me a choice between Kevin and a lot of coaches in the NFL, I'm taking Kevin. There's some gaffes there for sure, and there's some things that could be improved upon for sure. But my gosh, Matt Eberflus was horrific, and that's a major blemish on Ryan Poles. Now, Ben Johnson's a different story, but are they going to build a good enough defense for him? Not seeing it so far. Nathan, if Rob became president and a GM had to work under him, what power would the new GM really have? It's a good question, because I don't know how the structure would be. But if you're the president, you're overseeing the entire operation. whereas the general manager would be overseeing the scouting department and the pro player people, the college scouting people. And it is really truly a management position. I know we think of it as if it's a player acquisition position, but it really is a management position. So you are working every single day with your director of college scouting on, here's who we're looking at, here's what's happening with these different prospects, here's what we're tracking, here's who we're kind of starting to identify. That's in the draft process, which goes on really all year. And on the free agent side, not just in the offseason, but during the season, tracking what every team is doing, what players are upcoming free agents, what players on your team are upcoming free agents. And that person is organizing everybody to, including the coaching staff, to come to conclusions on directions, on players, on decisions. And Rob would be overseeing that entire process and being the direct connection to the Wilfs. And so if Rob doesn't want something to happen because he doesn't feel like it's in the better of the franchise long term, then in this scenario, he'd be able to say, all right, that's not what we're doing because that's not for the betterment of the franchise long term. Let's say they make that rule change and the Vikings want to give up 5 first-round draft picks for Joe Burrow. And Rob says, that's just not the right thing to do. So we're not going to do it. I have the final say. I'm working with the ownership and I'm the liaison to ownership and keeping them involved. I think that would be kind of how it works. That's just a guess because I don't know. But if that was the case, that's how I'd want it to work. So Rob's not like scouting players like the GM would be and working with the scouting department, watching, thousands of hours of tape. It's much more of a bigger picture type of position. And, like it's hard for a GM to manage a whole building. And I think Kwesi struggled with that a lot. I think he struggled with that more than he did some other stuff that has to do with the roster. I think he struggled with managing all those people, and having Rob and a GM there doing it might help. I mean, that's why a lot of teams do it this way. 1216 Vivek says Wilfs need to also think about what if they make Rob GM and things don't work out in, say, 3 or 4 years? Are they going to fire him or put him back in his old role? Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't work out, that is something to think about. But it's also the NFL. I mean, as much as they liked Rick Spielman, they had Rick Spielman forever. It was time, and they made that decision. But you're right. And I think for Rob, it's a good place in his career. He's been around for a really long time to go for this, knowing that it could result in you being fired at some point. But you're right. That does make it a little more challenging, I think. It's a fair point. Joker, we should have sold the future for this year, no future plan anyway, and delay the rebuild a year. Now, so you've brought this up once or twice, and I think from a philosophical perspective, I totally get what you're saying, is if you just went nuts this year with the understanding that if it doesn't work out, think of it this way. If it wasn't Kyler, if Kyler was 33, and you were not going to extend Kyler. This was a 1-year thing for an older quarterback that you were just, hey, whatever, man. We're not going to extend this quarterback pretty much no matter what. Then I would maybe agree with you and say, well, just go all in and see what happens. Kind of like Jets with Aaron Rodgers, and then he tears his Achilles. But yeah, sure. Go for it. The guy's old and he's still good, and see what you could do. Be I said Kyler if he's old, like a Favre 2009. There's really no future. Do everything you possibly can right here, right now. But with Kyler being just coming into his quarterback prime, and the fact that you might be able to have a couple of bites at the apple with him if he turns out to be good enough, or if you bring in a new quarterback into this environment, if you draft one, then you're trying to develop over multiple years around that guy on a certain timeline. So yes, it would have been better to go boom or bust under certain scenarios, but I see why they didn't want to do that this year, why playing it down the middle gives you a chance to win with the team that won 9 last year despite some of the worst quarterback play in the league. It gives you a chance to take another swing at that while also not hurting yourself into the future. So you are open to, if you draft a quarterback, if it turns out to be JJ and you're picking up his 5th-year option, that you're in a good situation to continue to build around him. I mean, I think this is a good play for them in that way. If it was a little bit different, I would agree with you and say, yeah, man, if you're not first, you're last, so just go for it. Also, like, we don't know what's going to happen through the rest of the summer, and there may be more of that. There may be more go for it type moves that we don't see coming right now. I mean, when was Micah Parsons traded for, right? JP, I think the Wilfs are making a mistake not naming Rob president of football ops and taking either Teasley, McKay, Gray as GM, considering one of them would accept being below Rob. So you're saying if you just made them like GM, you figured that one of them would accept being below Rob? Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I mean, if they just look at what Rob did and say, thanks for handling that, but we would prefer to go a very different direction with the front office under Nolan Teasley, and we want him to have complete power to do it, then yeah, it's better not to have that situation. I just think the way the Wilfs operate, it's better to have Rob in being a president of football ops. I think the way they want to run the franchise, it's better. And where they live and how connected they are, like, I think that's better. But if they were saying, look, we want our next czar, we want our guy to be number one, Les Snead, Howie Roseman style, like everybody knows the name of this GM because he's the dude. So we're hiring Nolan Teasley, then yeah, then you don't do that with Rob. But I get the sense that they would like to have the collaborative environment. Beavers, Quasey, it wasn't just the bad drafting, also the head-scratching trade-ups and trade-downs that most analysts across the board felt were bad deals. No disagreement there. And just, look, if you give away a little bit of draft capital here and there and here and there, it's sort of like me going to the cookie jar, where it's like, hey, it's just one cookie after breakfast, and it's just one cookie after lunch, and it's just two after dinner, and then I don't have any more cookies at the end of the day. Well, it's just one 6th round pick for Jalen Reagor, and it's just one 6th round pick for Cam Robinson. It's just, and look, the Cam Robinson thing was necessary. I get it. But if you do it over and over and over again, you end up with no draft capital in the day 3. And those are often not Stephon Diggs, but they often are your Cam Bynum or something, somebody who turns out to be decent, and just giving away. It makes it a lot tougher to build depth and to kind of get lucky. Like, you don't get lucky if you don't play with the lottery, right? So yeah, I mean, yeah, the initial trade down, it made a first impression that would just never go away the entire time he was there, for kind of good reason. Hunter says, I have a conspiracy theory. Okay, what if the Vikings told Kyler Murray that they'd frame the quarterback situation as a competition to make Kyler look better as someone who beat out a first rounder? I don't see it that way. I mean, you did qualify this as a conspiracy theory. Here's my thing. I mean, Kyler's probably not signing if they come in and say, look, man, you have to prove that you're better than JJ McCarthy, but we love McCarthy and we're all in on him, but you'll get your shot or something. Like, if it went that way, I can't imagine he's signing if they said we're all in on McCarthy, but maybe you can beat him out. Like, of course not. Of course, when he comes in, you're the guy. But that for someone like Kyler or any quarterback, competitive environment is not uncommon to any of these guys, right? Like, now Murray has not had another quarterback competing with him ever in his NFL career, but I don't think that going into practices believing that you have to perform every single day is anything new to any of these quarterbacks. I'm sure that Kevin O'Connell, and the way that he's managing it, is like, guys, we're going to go out there and perform every day and then see where we're at, like, at the end of the day. And that's how he's framing it to them, because you want JJ McCarthy pushing as hard as possible. It's kind of like this. If you have a quarterback competition and it's like a NASCAR race, some of the NASCARs are faster than others. They're on the same track, but it's unlikely that the car that's starting 38th is going to beat the car that's starting 3rd or 1st, I guess, in this case, right? So it's a competition. They're competing. It doesn't mean it's 50-50 though. They are competing every day with each other and with themselves to get better, but it doesn't mean that it starts at 50-50 and everybody's even. This is not a pole position, and I'm sure there's a name for it, other pole position. It's not like that. It is much more like Kyler Murray is starting as the 12th best quarterback in the NFL and JJ McCarthy starting as the 42nd. And look, you can win from 42nd place, but it takes a heck of a drive, right? So that might be a way to look at it. Friends of Taz between Murray and McCarthy. Vikings hopefully should have next year's starter in the bullpen this season. 3 number 1 picks to choose from. Yeah, I mean, Wentz doesn't really count anymore. It's kind of as a long-time backup, but I get what you're saying. It gives them the potential to hit on Murray. It gives them the potential for if something goes wrong for Murray that McCarthy figures it out. But I think what they desperately need is to know when you finish up week 18 and look around and go, all right, Kyler's our guy, or all right, Kyler's not our guy, or JJ's our guy, or JJ's not our guy. You need to know week 18. And with the Vikings decision, the mistake they made with Sam Darnold was, let's put it all on these 2 games and see how he does. And if he's great, then he's our guy. And if he's not, he isn't. Don't do that again. It's not just don't get rid of a decent quarterback. It's like, don't make that mistake again. And as I mentioned, with so many quarterbacks separated by not that much in the NFC, just having a quarterback who's good enough may be actually the thing now. I mean, before, the kind of way of thinking was, man, you just need to keep swinging till you get the elite quarterback and the great athlete. But now there's so many great athletes. They're everywhere. Because we talked about that with Kirk, where it's like, it's just not, the athleticism is not there. The arm strength to make crazy tight window throws is not there. And I'm not saying that in this current world that Kirk from 5 years ago would have gotten it done, but it is so even now in the NFC. It's so close between the first quarterback and the 9th quarterback, 10th quarterback. They've all had their moments. Like, where is Baker Mayfield on a given year, on a given week, right? And what does it have to do with? What does it look like? I mean, he had his great year in Tampa Bay when they were stacked on offense and Liam Cohen was calling the shots. Kind of feels like, that's going to be that way in the NFC for a while. Dak Prescott was winning 12 games when they had a defense. And then when they didn't, he wins 8 games. You could say this for so many quarterbacks in the NFC. Jared Goff is flawed, but is also really awesome at times and has top 5 offenses. So Kyler probably falls into that same category, which gives you an opportunity to build around him and, prove yourself that way and be in the mix that way, because unless Caleb Williams really clicks or Jaden Daniels and they're just freakish, most of the quarterbacks in the NFC are right around that same range as where Kyler is. And his peak in his career is 8th. So he's another one of those guys that has peaked at some point in the top 10. And his worst has been much worse than that. His worst, he's been a below average quarterback. So where does he fall as a Minnesota Viking? Let's see. Yeah. Steve says, you may want to share your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers, stating today that 2026 is his last season. Well, one is, Aaron has trouble with the truth sometimes, so we'll see. But, it should be, right? There can't be much left in the Aaron Rodgers tank. I will always enjoy this about Rodgers. That, look, I get it from all of you. The Packers, you hate them. They're disgusting. And they're fans who, I don't know, put cutouts of Brett Favre in their lawns or weirdos and, all that sort of stuff. I get it. Some of the coolest stuff that I have been a part of covering the NFL has been going to Lambeau and seeing Mike Zimmer's defense versus Aaron Rodgers. It was amazing. Every single time it was awesome. 2018, 2019, just so incredible to see him play. And, US Bank Stadium, him versus the crowd and everything. The throws the guy could make, the pre-snap stuff with Harrison Smith. It was my first game at US Bank Stadium in 2016 was Aaron Rodgers versus Sam Bradford. Bradford beats him in the opening of US Bank Stadium. So I'll always think, no matter how much of a doofus he can be at times and how kind of sad the bumbling end has been for him and might be even worse this year, that it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen to have watched Rodgers, especially against Zimmer's defenses when they were great. So I respect that part. It's as good as it gets. It's as good as quarterback play gets. Him and Drew Brees. Let's see. Friends of Taz, Murray was benched. You mean last year? McCarthy was the Vikings starter and was improving as the season went along. Murray was hurt again and benched. JJ will compete against an injured, benched free agent quarterback. I think your framing of that is kind of BS. Sorry, but like, we know what happened. I for sure know what happened because I've been told this, but I mean, it's obvious to see what happened in Arizona, a benched quarterback. You mean a 2-time Pro Bowl quarterback, right? Like, really depends on where you want to go with that, because we all know, and I've watched the games back, that Murray was playing well for Arizona, and they were in every game, and they played well against Seattle and didn't win it, but they were in that game. They beat Carolina, playoff team, a drop pass away from Marvin Harrison from beating San Francisco, a playoff team, to start the season. I mean, he was benched because he had a foot injury, and by the time it was healed, there was absolutely no reason to bring him back because they wanted to tank and get Jeremiah Love. I mean, come on now. Like, we gotta all be intellectually honest about stuff like that. I mean, Murray's track record, 2024, 2021, 2020, he's one of the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL. And he had an ACL injury at the worst time in the middle of a 2022 season that was a nightmare, and then comes back at the end of 23, plays pretty well down the stretch, but clearly was not back to being his full self, and then had, I think, a really excellent year in 2024 with a team that wasn't ready to win. So the supporting cast, the wide receivers, the coaching, the ownership, the weight room, the everything for Kyler Murray was not really in his favor very often, and yet still has had 3 out of 6 seasons turn out to be very good. So he is miles better than what JJ McCarthy has been. Miles better. I mean, McCarthy would throw for 160 yards and we'd put a crown on him last year. I mean, you're talking about Kyler Murray, who's had 350-yard games all over the place in his career. Games where he scrambles for, 75 yards and touchdowns. And I mean, this guy is taking a team to the playoffs. I mean, we are talking about 2 wildly different resumes. We got to be honest about that stuff. Come on. 1216 Vivek, Rob, and if he has a great plan for the franchise, great, but we won 2 playoff games in 15 years, and one of them is because of a miracle play. It's okay to look outside the box. Yeah, I agree, but I also think that you can't just look at that stat, say, well, we've only won this many playoff games, so everyone here is stupid. Like, we can't do that, right? We also can't, because we know that there's a lot of factors that have gone into that, especially at the quarterback position. And Bacha 80s says, when playing it down the middle, you remain in the middle. I mean, referring to what I said about, hitting it with the hybrid onto the fairway. But I think that in this case, like, hitting it down the middle opens you up for success down the road also, while not screwing you right now. Down the middle means, in my mind, the right way to play it, rather than pulling out the driver. And if you hit it in the woods, your franchise is screwed for several years. And we've seen that happen. That's 2021. I mean, they were restructuring contracts, sending draft capital out the building, and bringing back guys that they shouldn't have brought back. Anything was on the table in that sort of year, and that hurt them and set them back. And really, if you want to be a Kwesi apologist, you'd maybe be right to say that the reason the 2022 draft was so bad was that they were trying to chase the bad drafts before and the bad decisions and the bad cap situation and everything else that they were trying to dig themselves out of. So yeah, I meant it as a complimentary way of this is, year over year type of franchise approach, while keeping it together, the team that was still very competitive last year, even with horrific quarterback play. Purple Kool-Aid, whoever gets the job will understand that we're not a playoff team every year. Don't sell out for win now moves and hold on to veterans too long, rather than make the moves with more strategy. Yep, I agree with that. Yeah, fair enough, Skull Shadow. Yeah, the defense won 6 or 7, but it's kind of the point though, right? Like the defense was good enough because you have one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. So if you keep this largely together, and maybe improve your offense by, I don't know, 75 points because you have a much better quarterback, then you're talking about something serious. Purple Kool-Aid, the talk of wanting someone to bring the building together leans towards Rob, but I feel like you need to have new blood to provide a fresh perspective. I know they said no president of football operations, but it feels like they should. I mean, that was the way Mark Wilf answered my question. I mean, many weeks ago now. Like they've had a lot of time to have conversations in between then. They may have changed their mind. That happened weeks ago. So I don't know, but it seemed like they wanted the same structure as usual. Abnormal. The running back position worries me. Wasn't where you'd want to see it with Mason and Jones last year, and Claiborne reminds me too much of the hype of McBride a couple years ago. I think that he's very different than Dwayne McBride, but it's fair. Like a 6th round draft pick, how much can they do? I think the better comp is probably Ty Chandler if you're skeptical of, look how explosive this guy is, but is he really a complete running back? So I think that, yeah, you're fair there. Jordan Mason averaged 4.8 yards per carry, and if he's your number 1 and Jones is bringing the number 2 with some sprinkled in Damon Claiborne, that's great. But I think that what they're relying on more is the schematic element of it and changing the schematic element of it, and maybe the offensive line being healthier. But the schematic element, I think, is big for them in being more effective in the run game. I tend to agree with you that I thought there would be a change at running back rather than bringing back Aaron Jones. And it is a little suspect because you worry about the health for Jones. You worry about the explosiveness falling off, and Claiborne isn't someone that you could just necessarily rely on. I think you're being totally fair with that. I would throw out there that in terms of like rushing expected points added, they were okay. They were above average at the end of the day. They just didn't pass the ball, man. I mean, I don't know. Like we don't really think too much about the running, when having a decent success rate when you're constantly missing passes and turning the ball over and throwing interceptions and getting sacked. Like when we look at O'Connell threw this percentage or whatever, it's like, yeah, I mean, because if you're playing from behind a lot, you're just going to have to keep throwing, even if Carson Wentz has no arm left. Dustin says anything other than an open competition seems dumb. I guess so. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as you went out and got a veteran quarterback who's been very good at times in his career to turn around the offense from where it was last year. And I think that some of this stuff is really dependent on how much you've paid attention to Kyler Murray recently. Because if you could transpose 2024 Kyler onto this team, it's like a 12-win team. It's an 11-win team. So I think he's better than some people see him as by maybe quite a bit with his recent performance. But that's always hard to contextualize because one, I mean, yeah, I don't expect you to watch 22 games of all 22 film. That would be a me thing. But I also think that it's hard to even in your brain. It's almost like, well, Sam Darnold was bad with Carolina, so he's bad. It's like, yeah, this is so much different than Carolina. This is so much different than Arizona. But you kind of got to buy into that. I don't think, you need to crown Kyler Murray today. So there's that. I mean, you can see how he works with your team and Jefferson and everything first, which is probably why it's going that way. But once you get into training camp, there's no hiding. It's like how you distribute the first team reps will be the truth. And if I'm guessing, I would say that it's going to be Kyler right from the beginning, all the first team reps, he's the guy. And it would be on McCarthy to somehow knock him off that, or it's really on Kyler Murray himself. Like if he works out great in the offense from day one, then it's going to be fine. We're not going to talk about the competition. But if he were to really, really struggle and he wasn't getting the offense and he's butting heads with KOC, then things could be quite different. So yeah, I mean, I think the way I'd put it is there's no benefit to just declaring it today. It doesn't help anything to declare it today. A real open competition? No, because your team needs to win. You need a real serious veteran quarterback who can run the full offense and make plays and have, high type of moments, not someone that you're just sort of hoping takes a big step from being 42nd out of 45 quarterbacks in quarterback rating to what? I mean, Kyler Murray's been 8th to 12th in the NFL. I mean, what kind of jump would we be talking? I think McCarthy can eventually get there, but doing it in one offseason to that degree, it just doesn't seem, even if he had a great camp, it's just like, can you really trust that that's going to happen? Purple Kool-Aid, did the defense benefit from a weak second half? A bit like the offense, our first half was tougher and the D didn't look as good. They improved for sure, but did they get lucky? The last week of the season, yeah. I mean, they didn't have to play any of Green Bay's real players. They got to play Clayton Tune. So that's a trivia. Somebody asked if we could someday, like in the summer, if we could start doing one day where like hour number 2, we just do some trivia. And I want to work on that because I think that's a great idea. That's a trivia question. Who started week 18 against the Vikings? Clayton freaking Tune. And they beat his face in. So that pumped up the numbers a little bit, but the game against Christmas Day against Detroit, or even against Dak Prescott, that offense was top 5 in the league going into that game. So they really showed that they were there. It's with Harrison Smith though. So that's the big question for this year is if you don't have Harrison, can you reach that type of level? Skull says if he was a special teams package, how many blocks would Wemby have for field goals? Now we've definitely gotten into hour number 3 of the show. A lot. If you could have somebody who is 7'4" and can jump like, I don't know what he could jump, 30 inches in the air, maybe higher than that. I don't know how you kick over that person. I don't know what you'd have to do. Can you just take out his legs? You'd have to have some sort of specific blocking way of going about it because I have no idea. I don't know how high exactly the ball goes in the air when it's kicked, but I mean, usually it's there's a lot of kicks where it's just barely clearing the hands of guys who are 6'5". So 7'4". There is a story that Auburn's football team tried to get Charles Barkley to block kicks. And then the football coach was like, no, that is insane. Jay Mulls, ever since Rodgers left Green Bay, I've loved him. Yeah, fair enough. Nasaj, every time I hear someone say Murray was beat out by Brissett, it flags that person as non-serious opinion. Well, yeah, I mean, or just maybe not that, but maybe more like little agenda pushing on the JJ side, or just not informed. Like, there are many of you who come in here and chat, and I can really tell this around draft and free agent season where, I mean, you spend a lot of time on this, and that's why I love you, and that's why this is great. But not everybody who jumps, and I welcome people who have opinions that don't spend all of your life. That's what we're here for, is to kind of have a conversation and, maybe learn a little more or go back and forth. So, I don't think it's necessarily that, but it's like I said, I mean, if you weren't paying attention to the Arizona Cardinals, congratulations. You didn't waste your life, right? If you didn't watch the last 22 games of tape and study every analytic, I don't blame you for that. You shouldn't. That's not a good way. Like, there is sunshine outside that you should go see. So it's not that, but I think that you make a fair point of, like, when people say that, it's just not accurate. It's just not what happened. Jacoby Brissett went 1-11. Kyler Murray won more games out of 5 than Jacoby Brissett did out of 12. And not only that, I had this stat, and I wish I had memorized it, when we were really getting into the nitty-gritty of arguing about Kyler Murray, that Murray won something like, as when he was the Arizona Cardinals quarterback the entire time, he won something like 45% of his games. And when he didn't play, they won something like 8% of their games. It was insane. It's an insane stat. It was crazy. Like, they never won a thing if Kyler Murray didn't play. So everybody's not playing on the same playing field. There's no Jefferson. There's no KOC offense, which gets receivers open. There's no Addison number 2 receiver. There's no, like, Rams system that you're playing in. It's what, I mean, I'm not going to disparage Drew Petzing because I think he did a good job, but I mean, Kingsbury, what was that? what was that offense? That was the, hey, go run around Kyler and figure it out offense. So yeah. And yeah, you're right. Skull Shadow with, him wanting out of Arizona, not wanting to sign a contract extension or redo his contract. Are you going to play him? And what if he gets hurt again and then he gets guaranteed money because he's hurt? There's all those things. There's all those moving parts. So, Skull Shadow, at this point, McCarthy should be looked at as a project. He's not plug and play, but he has potential. I like that. I think that's very fair. I think that's a very fair way to look at it. Beavers with the heavy defense-oriented draft this year, turning out okay potentially. I'm hoping that next year they go heavy offensive line, finally address. Well, you say finally, but I mean, they spent a first rounder on Darisaw, a first rounder on Jackson. They've developed Blake Brandel. They spent $18 million on Fries and a second rounder on Brian O'Neill. So they've addressed out of the offensive line. The issue is, and they spent a bunch of money on Ryan Kelly last year too. It's that they have not the sick irony, the absolute twisted, sick irony of the Vikings offensive line is that the best one they've had in many years is 2023, and Kirk got hurt. So that's really unfortunate because that offensive line was pretty good. But they have the guys that if they are healthy, and when they were healthy last year, when even 4 of them were healthy last year, they were really good against Baltimore, against Chicago. It's just they weren't out there very often. So it comes down to health. Where they've improved, and to your point, is the depth. That's where they've improved. Drafting Tiernan, that's a draft pick that I just was like, I don't really know this guy when they drafted him. The tackle, 3rd round, are you sure? The more I've watched him, the more I like the Caleb Tiernan pick. I think even worst case scenario, if he's a swing tackle, you will play in the NFL if you're a swing tackle. I know this is the second Rashad Hill mention of the show, but Rashad Hill played a lot over his years for the Vikings. You will play, and getting Ryan Vandemark too. These are big moves for them, even if they're not ones that are flashy. Abnormal says, best case scenario, JJ beats Kyler for the job. Kyler has raised the bar in the QB room. If JJ objectively clears it this year, you have a higher ceiling with JJ in the long run. I mean, look, I don't think that JJ McCarthy has a higher ceiling than Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is the number 1 overall draft pick. He has been excellent at times in his career. He's been in MVP conversations halfway through seasons, and it hasn't worked out. But I mean, that is a high ceiling. If you want to talk about a high ceiling, Kyler Murray's best stretches are up there with any great quarterback in the NFL. It's about getting 17 of those. With JJ McCarthy, I don't see the physical capabilities of Kyler, as in, I don't think the accuracy can get there to meet Kyler. And I definitely don't think the speed and scrambling can get there either. So I look at Murray as being a higher ceiling quarterback, but he hasn't reached it yet so far in his career. And if McCarthy did straight up beat him out, it was better than a quarterback who's been as good as Kyler at times in his career, it would say a lot about him. But it also would, because it would take a heck of a performance in order for him to straight up beat out Kyler, or it would take Kyler really collapsing and just not assimilating himself with this team at all. Purple Kool-Aid, Harrison Smith coming back and getting back to form was a good point. Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's what changed it second half of the season. And that's the biggest question going into this season for me. Oh, thank you for the update about the Western Conference Final. Man, I'll probably get to that shortly. But great conversation that we've had here tonight. I've really enjoyed it. Super Rod, Arizona, not a functional organization. Not even close. Not even close. It's not just that they're not functional. It's that they didn't have good teams. They didn't have good rosters. They didn't have good coaches. So I think that gives you plenty of reason to look at it and say, it's now or never for Kyler Murray. If it doesn't work here, it's not going to work. But this is the best scenario he's been given in his career. Anyway, well, yeah, I appreciate the reminder that the Western Conference Final is going to go on, or is going on right now. So I'd like to see that. Thank goodness I didn't turn off Knicks Cavs last night. That was fun. Hockey, I will say, is a little bit tough to watch. No Buffalo Sabres, my hometown team. Blew it in overtime. And the Minnesota Wild had an epic collapse in ways they only could. And the Timberwolves are sitting there talking about they didn't put in enough effort or bond together enough or something. It's always something. So anyway, the playoffs still going on without Minnesota sports teams. But a lot coming up. Tomorrow, going to have Ben Gessling on the show, and he's going to break down his opinion and insight into all the GM candidates. And we're going to have a conversation to get his opinions on the stuff we've talked about tonight. And also, you guys asked for it last week. Manny was not available last week, but Manny Hill will be back to pick the schedule amidst the GM search tomorrow. And we'll have a conversation about, that and other things around the NFL as well. So some fun stuff coming up. So make sure you keep an eye on the channel. Also, you guys were mad at Eric Edholm for power ranking the Vikings 28th. So I brought him on the show, friends with Eric, and that video is up right now. We had a good conversation. He kind of backed off a little bit of his poor power ranking for the Vikings, but we had a good discussion. So check that out also. Thanks everybody for the really good conversation. As always, we'll be live again 7:30 Central tomorrow night for Manny Picks the Schedule, and keep an eye out for that Ben Gessling podcast tomorrow. So thank you all, and we'll catch you later. Football.